Welcome to episode 22 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week we talk about the super close clashes at Marvel Stadium between Essendon and Adelaide. There was a blowout with St Kilda on West Coast. Geelong and the Doggies down at Goomba Stadium is very, very interesting. The intense shootout between Carlton and North Melbourne that no one was really expecting that made for an incredible match to watch. Sorry, I'm slipping over my words. And we also take a look at the run home for each of the teams going into the last 5 games of the season. So let's jump into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Slowly losing my throat for some reason. Well, I know the reason. Yeah. So I'm not coming down with sickness, but I might sound a bit croaky. Apart from that, yeah, had a good time watching football. Spent bit of time with my cousins up here. Took a little trip to Theo, so a good mixture of footy watching and just doing other things.
Sounds pretty nice. I'm surprised I wasn't losing my throat because I went out Saturday night to a little Twitch Melbourne community meetup at Fortress. First time I've ever been to Fortress. I was purposely avoiding it, especially because it opened during the pandemic. So it's like it just instantly gave me like sort of gross vibes. You know, like smelly gamers and lack of body care. I got to meet a bunch of like my online friends, like a bunch of other streamers that we we all play Overwatch and stuff, and it was really good. It was good to actually get to hang out with them. We made some loose plans to try and have like little meetups, at least like prior to PAX and things like that, prior to like the big events. So hopefully we'll get to do more of that. And then I got to watch Friday night's game at least. I did watch some of Saturday's games, so we're going to go through those, of course. And I watched a couple of Sunday games too, so I did at least get some footy time, which was good. But I really needed that time out of the house. It was really, really nice.
Nice.
All right. Speaking of Friday night's game, shall we jump right in?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So we're heading over to Marvel Stadium for what would currently be considered a Friday night blockbuster, considering what happened. It was pretty solid back and forth between Essendon and Adelaide for most of the night. One team scored like 8 goals in a quarter and then scored like 3 the next quarter, whereas the other team scored like 3 in that previous quarter and then like 9 in the quarter after. It was very, very intense back and forth. The final quarter itself became a pretty intense shootout, and the scoreline says it all. 17-11, 113 to 17-13, 115, with Rochelle kicking the match winner for Adelaide with 2 minutes left in the game. It was massive. Crowds went insane. And it ruined a lot of people's tips, including our own, because we didn't tip the Crows. But no,
small margin.
It was a great game to watch. Absolutely thrilling. The standout performer, Ben Keys, who's been pretty solid for most of the season. Early on, again, we've talked about this before. Adelaide having that struggling to kind of find their identity, especially after the heartbreak that they had last season. And then there's
in that forward line.
Yeah, and then they lost Silthorpe. They had Tex out for a while, and they really struggled to kind of gel together with no real tall out there. Then obviously Tex came back, and they found some form. And now that Silthorpe's back full time, he looks amazing up forward. But Ben Keys stood out tall. He kicked 5-1 from 22 disposals, 77.3% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 12 score involvements, 8 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and 544 meters gained. He was all over that forward line. He was pushing up into the midfield as well to be able to give Silthorpe some ball. It was pretty thrilling to watch.
Yeah, and I think that was the important thing too. Like the fact that they'd lost. I forgot who it was in the midfield, but he had to cover for I think it was Dawson. He got that head knock, was it?
Yes, it was Dawson. I do have that noted down.
Yeah, so he had to do that, and sure enough, he gets the final clearance that went to provide the inside 50 for Rochelle's game winner. So he was everything involved in Oh, sorry, he was involved in everything good. Absolutely fantastic game. One of my favorite individual performances for the year.
Absolutely. Like, he pretty much. I wouldn't say he won that off his own boot, but he did a lot right to be able to put Adelaide in the position to win it just right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so clean, which Adelaide pretty much were all night. I know that it was 17-13, so technically they were more inaccurate, but I think they had less inside 50s, and they were just able to make the most of their opportunities.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Riley O'Brien was good to see back in the ruck after they having some weird ruck issues over the past month or so. Like, they would take him out and then put him
Sent
back
back
in.
to do some defensive work or something.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Demoted.
Maybe he just, I don't know, wasn't just lacked a bit of defensive work rate.
Yeah, I think the words going around were around the ground stuff, so either not working hard enough or not getting back defensively.
Well, I mean, it seems to have worked out. Finished with 14 touches, 11 contested possessions, 47 hitouts with 13 to advantage, 4 clearances, 6 score involvements, and 9 1%ers. You know, 9 percenters, especially for a tall, is kind of like a big key thing because you're able to win a lot of those one-on-ones as a tall player. And, you know, we have a lot of defenders, like a lot of tall defenders in the game. Ben Mackay is one of them, who I'll talk about in a minute, who gets massive amount of 1%. It's because of that, like, being able to use that tall, strong body again in a one-on-one contest.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, again, 1%ers count spoils, so a lot of defenders and ruckmen get them for solid defensive spoiling efforts.
And then I want to talk about a little veteran transition player called Rory Laird. I thought he had a great game as well. I've already missed my spot. There we go. 29 disposals at 69% efficiency. That's very nice. 11 contested possessions, 7 clearances, 8 score involvements, and 20 pressure acts. He was pretty much running both ways all night, and he was a lot of he was the key player who did a lot of their ball movement along the wing as well.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, sorry.
Very good.
Yeah, I think in terms of transition, the two big players were him and Mitchell Hinge. Mitchell Hinge being more of a halfback. They were a lot involved in a lot of Adelaide's good movement, which was very effective for them.
Yeah, Hinge was a lot of their key rebound 50s, and Laird was a lot of their just wing running.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just to, considering how close the game was, Essendon definitely had some key standout players, but I'm going to talk about Ben Mackay because I mentioned it before. He's had an incredible couple of months. I'll give him credit. Like, despite how Essendon seemed to have kind of hit that point again where they struggle to finish out a season, and they're possibly on the cusp of losing their top 8 spot just in general, even though this game was really close and it could have gone either way in the end. Ben Mackay has at least always put in solid performances. He finished with 19 touches with 12 contested possessions, 13 intercept possessions, 11 1%ers, and 100% time on ground. He was pretty much covering both sides all night. He was usually always the one deep in defense as well. Like, he's occasionally pushed up onto the halfback line, but he's been very, very strong in protecting that goal square as well. It's like the damage could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it definitely could have. And again, for Essendon, honestly, I don't want to say they were unlucky, but this is definitely like their flip side of a lot of results that went their way earlier in the year.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously the funny thing is,
the Adelaide Essendon game at the Adelaide Oval earlier in the year as well.
Yeah, that finished with the controversial non-holding call. So it was sort of good as a viewer, to see it, Adelaide get that win. But
it was a nice little storyline to follow through.
Yeah, as I said, it's just one of those ones where Essendon went too much off the pace. I think Adelaide's in some very good form, but as you mentioned, they were just finding it a bit hard. Obviously, when they let that run of 8 goals go to Adelaide, got to claw it back, but you never really want to be fighting in that sort of deficit. So as I said, defensively they've got a lot to look at. But I agree with you. Like, the one person that was at least trying to keep it all together it was Ben McKay. It was pretty solid down there.
Whereas I can't remember if I actually noted him down in the Carlton North Melbourne game, but it's a very big contrast to what Harry Mackay's been doing in the forward line.
Yeah.
Sometimes not as much of an effort, considering, you know, when you've got Charlie Curnow down there, you kind of don't need to do that much effort, but still got to present.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the most important thing. If you're not the target as a leading forward, you've got to create options, which is a problem with some other teams that we might talk about. But yeah, as I said, now in terms of Ben's effort, yeah, it's always one that's giving it. A lot of the things with Essendon is, you know, they get a lot of flack for being up and down in performances, but it's very rarely this year that I think it's been a pure effort thing, especially not team-wise. You always get a few players that dip in and out, seem to be a bit down, but no, team-wise has been quite good this year. It's just starting to even out for them a bit.
Yeah, again, like a lot of people notice this. Like they have a weird trend of just not like fading out at the end of the season. I hope that in this case they do actually make finals, because, you know, the long-standing joke has become a bit too much of a joke in some supporters' eyes. They do deserve at least a finals win. Whether it's a grand final win, that remains to be seen. But it's just give them something.
It's getting a bit cliche to pull out that stat at this point, but yeah, hopefully they'll be able to keep that.
But with how close the season is, it might still not happen.
Exactly. Because are you gonna go through the run home now, or
I want to talk about Jai Caldwell first, and then
okay.
We could probably cover the two teams. We may as well just do them team by team at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, and then
sorry, I thought you were leading into it.
I was about to, but I want to talk about Jai Caldwell. He was the last player that I was going to mention. He finished with 20 touches at 90% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 3 clearances, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 21 pressure acts. It's unfortunate that late in the game he suffered a head knock. I can't remember if it was actually concussion that he got dealt, or if it was just rough contact or something like that. But yeah, he had an incredible game. Just unfortunate that he couldn't finish it out. For other injuries, Nick Murray of the Adelaide Crows went down with a left knee. Thankfully, it wasn't an ACL. That was all cleared up. Not even a PCL. So he might only be out for only a couple of weeks, which is good for the end. Jordan Butts, left foot injury. He will be out for a bit. And Jordan Dawson with a concussion. So he will miss at least this week's game and maybe next week's game, depending on when it is.
Yeah, and I don't think we've emphasized enough how impressive this win is for Adelaide, considering they had 2 key defensive players pretty much straight away. Jordan Butts was about halfway through the game. Nick Murray was pretty instantaneous.
And then,
so yeah, as I said, pretty bold.
For their run home, let me find where specifically I'm looking at. You did order this correctly, and I'm just not looking properly.
Yeah, it's literally first page.
I was scrolled down too low. There we go. Let me bring up the website view. So this is what we're looking at for the run home. So for Essendon, they've got round 20 to 24 as for every team. They're playing St Kilda at Marvel this week, so pretty much neutral ground. Fremantle at the MCG, which will be good experience for both teams, especially if both teams plan on playing finals. Then they've got Gold Coast at Marvel, Sydney at Marvel, Brisbane at the Gabba, and it's a fairly interesting run home. Like there's a couple of games that are definitely winnable for them. St Kilda they could beat. Freo kind of 50-50 at the moment because Freo are in pretty solid form. Gold Coast Suns at Marvel should be a one game just right off the bat because we don't. I mean, unless the Suns are going to show up and finally get that away win.
Suns could show something, but yeah, as I said, near the crunch time, because the Suns will be fighting to try and get a few wins. So, yeah, as you said,
Sydney at Marvel could also be a 50-50. Sydney lost recently to St Kilda at Marvel. And then the Brisbane Lions at the Gabba, Essendon will probably lose that because Lions are in solid form and they've turned the Gabba back into their fortress. So, predictability, you could probably see them get their finals berth, but it's also a 50-50 at the same time.
It's a bit iffy, yeah, as I said. I think if they win 3, that would have done enough. They could fluke it with 2, but with such low percentage, I know they got the draw, but they're competing with the Western Bulldogs, who are likely to take their spot if they get 2 and they do well. So yeah, as I said, the main thing is they have 4 games, and not only that, 4 games in a row, not leaving Victoria, which really helps their cause. So yeah, I would say they're still a likely candidate, but I'd say they're one of the more 50-50 ones for finals for me. Yeah. And I should say we got this from the Fox Footy website, so it does have remaining fixture difficulty, but I'll take that with a grain of salt because when the top 10's so jammed, the difference between playing 10th and 3rd is really not that much.
And not to mention, like, injuries could hit a team at any time and completely change the whole run home just in general.
Yeah, for sure.
And the Adelaide Crows have a really strong and really dangerous front home. So they've got Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval, which, with how Hawthorn's playing, Adelaide could lose that. Geelong in Geelong, again. Although, actually, Geelong is pretty beatable down there now. So Adelaide could have a strong chance. The Bulldogs at Adelaide Oval, that's a 50-50 game. Because both teams, pretty decent form, although the injuries that Adelaide currently have, hopefully will be able to come back, especially like Dawson. Then Port Adelaide for the next showdown match. That could also go either way. Let's be honest.
They're fairly incomprehensible.
And then Sydney at the SCG. Sydney has now proven to be beatable at the SCG. So Adelaide could surprise them up there. But I think by the time round 24 comes around, I think Sydney will be back in solid form with.
And Adelaide's most likely not going to be. Like I said, I can see them winning a few of these, and I think it's a good chance to prove themselves, get some form into 2025. But yeah, they'll need to win all 5 to get finals. They're very mathematical at this point.
If they can at least end on a high note, they should be good to at least finish out the season and carry some of that momentum into.
I think they just don't want to lose out. I think that's the main thing. But 2, I would say, is would be a fairly good result.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if they can finish top 10, that'd be really, really good for them at minimum. But granted, like, they were pretty much the same position as they were last year, so it's not like unreasonable to at least finish the same spot that they finished last season.
Yeah, and as I said, it will be good because they built out of a fairly bad place, so they'll at least build some resilience. But yeah, as I said, it's not looking likely that will actually be in any chance for finals.
No. All right, let's.
I just did one for every team, so.
No, I figure that's the case. All right, let's move on to the next game in our run, which is St Kilda West Coast. I think is our next one. Well,
you got that one, so I'll get GWS Gold Coast first.
Yeah, go that one first.
Expansion clash.
Go.
Yeah. So again, at NG Stadium, it looked like an absolute belting on the scoreboard. But the Suns truly would have made this a contest if they had any iota of finishing prowess, as they turned territory and possession dominance into some of the worst forward 50 play I've seen this year. And I'm a Port supporter, so that's a pretty harsh comment. Generating more inside 50s with 66 than actual score for the night, losing the goals per inside 50 count 9% to GWS's 30%, as they would have no trouble with their ball movement. Conversely, as the Suns sort of gas themselves with ineffective offense and would produce a very tepid 6-14, 50 to 14-5, 89, as they record yet another away loss. I will say it was very blustery, and it was hard to move the ball. We saw both teams create a few errors earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
Territory should have been the key to the contest, and for the most part, it looks like Suns I would have done that. But yeah, them blazing the ball forward, it seemed to be working against him because the ball would just come back with interest as GWS West would pick a slew of tall players up in their forward line who were very keen to convert. This caused the young Gold Coast defense. I thought they were actually caught a bit into wanting to press up, and cover the deeper options. They were sort of caught in no man's land, and that again was a bit due to the Gold Coast midfield not quite running back as hard as they were running forward. In terms of some individual performance, I would say Moyle was actually looking very dominant early, and he would get a bulk of the hit-outs, with a lot of them being somewhat effective. 36 hit-outs, 16 possessions, 7 clearances. But as we've said for the Suns, this only led them kicking 1 goals 2 from their massive 13-plus clearance wins. With highlight, that's been a problem all year for the Suns. And, it was actually a good ruck battle because Kieran Briggs, he was very good for the night, but he was getting more dangerous with the forward play, getting more goal assists to make up for, the deficit in the contest. So, they were quite okay to lose it because Briggs was just, literally scoring more in goal assists than what was getting given away with the clearance losses. Another shutdown performance by Toby Bedford. He got the Anderson role and limited him to, I think it was a possession count in the teens. Very low for Anderson. I wasn't in the teens. It was 27, but it was very minimum impact, 55% efficiency. And yeah, as that he didn't really do much of any particular damage, as none of the Gold Coast midfield really did. Flanders racked up possession. He was the main ball getter. I think he got 43 possessions. But, a lot of his ball movement going forward left a lot to be desired. Whereas I would say in the midfield, only former Captain Swallow seemed like doing anything dangerous. Lockie Whitfield, one of the best players of the ground, showed up the Gold Coast in how to play possession, but still be defensively responsible. He got 10 marks, got 780 meters gained at 80% efficiency, and it was also complemented by keeping Ben Long, his direct opponent, to 1 goals 2 and 7 possessions for the night. And along with King missing 0 goals 3 with a couple of misset shots, the Giants sort of exposed a pretty open secret for the Gold Coast. It's when you shut down their 2 linchpins, they just don't provide enough scoring opportunities to their other forwards. I've done a little stat thing here, and I'll sort of finish up with this. The Gold Coast, with those 2, Ben King has just over 1 score involvement per game that isn't off his direct score. So, as I said, it could be, just a behind or a goal, so it's not even counting that. And for a small forward, Ben Long, 2 goals 6, that's his score involvements that aren't off his own boot. So what I've done is just taken their average score and take off their score involvement. Oh, sorry, take that from their score involvements because that's a combined one. So yeah, for reference, that's what Charlie Conroy gets per game as a tall forward. So yes, because I thought that was interesting because apparently Ben Long's rated elite in the competition for small forwards. The only other one being Toby Green, which I thought was a bit interesting because I wouldn't quite have him there. He's an important piece, but yeah, as I said, it more goes towards Gold Coast system, but distribution. They struggle to get players like Humphrey Walters and even Lukosius at times set up. And, as I said, down back there, Iden and Buckley were very great. Harry Perriman sort of kept that together. And Hogan was excellent up forward. 4 goes 1, 6 marks inside 50s, and some great tackles inside 50 with 3. And the last player I want to mention is Darcy Jones, who was involved early with a lot of fast transition plays on the wing. and sort of set the tone for the match, prove that their transition was always going to be better than the Gold Coast going forward. And yeah, that's all I really got to say. The only other thing was this is actually one of the biggest swings in X score since it's ever been recording.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, according to X score, they should have won 85 to 64, which to do the math is a swing of 59. So it really shows just how wasteful the Gold Coast were. I'm not saying that they should have won it because obviously part of their waste was their forward entries, but yeah, as I said, this was a extremely bad forward half performance by the Gold Coast, and yeah, as I said, it's a bit of a shame that away from home, their star-studded talent really can't find ways to generate scores that aren't off opponents' turnovers. And it's been the go all year, but they just need one game where that's going to break, and I don't think that's going to happen. As we, we'll look at their own home now, I suppose. But yeah, as I said, I much rather think that they would lose. Lose at home, especially with the key clash coming up, than they would win away. So, but we'll see about that.
Yeah. I am looking at their run home now, and honestly, it's very interesting for both teams. GWS are in decent form, but they're coming up against teams that are also in really, really good form. But then you compare it to the Gold Coast Suns, and it's not about, for them, it's not even about whether they're coming up against teams in decent form or not. It's the travel location. If that curse is going to keep following them this year.
Well, I actually think that's for both teams because while technically the Giants have a few home games, they've only got one game at NG left as they play Hawthorn at Monica. And yeah, as I said, they're facing the Bulldogs at Eureka Stadium, also known as
Ballarat.
Yeah, Ballarat. So yeah, it's very interesting for them because a few of their games could be decided by playing at fringe stadiums. At the other side, that might play into their advantage. Who really knows? Bulldogs are quite good at Mars. Probably a bit more dangerous than Hawthorn at Monica. Not saying like in form, but you know what I mean, like track record. But yeah, as I said, yeah, really tough with the Giants. But at the same time, yeah, they're one of the teams where probably 2 wins would get them into the finals with their percentage, which is very possible. You would think Melbourne and Freo
are probably the
would
two
be the
games.
most likely, considering Fremantle's at NG. And, if they can pinch another win, it would secure them. But yeah, they really want to start off with that Melbourne win. That's pretty much not negotiable, but it's a real uphill.
It's kind of a do or die sort of win that they need.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it's a bit ugly considering the rest of their draw.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the Suns. As I mentioned, Q clash of people's first with Brisbane's form.
Could ruin their currently home game winning streak at the same time.
Yeah, and they again. Well, as I say, Fox Footy says they need to win 4. I'd probably agree with that. They'll get the 13 wins, which you're pretty much saying 13 wins is the bar.
I think it's
with this logjam.
I think for the Gold Coast Suns specifically, it's more about percentage. Like, because yeah, they're 12th on the ladder, but their percentage is like 103%, which is low compared to some of the other teams in the top 8, apart from Essendon.
Yeah. But again, it's what you say. It's away from home from Gold Coast. And again, their first West Coast and Richmond. But if that poor away form continues, they might even be struggling to win, let alone rack up the percentage that you might expect against, facing bottom 4 teams. As you know, I respect Richmond, but it's still an opportunity.
Yeah, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, like Richmond are in decent form. It's just about one, not being able to be accurate enough to win a game, for one, and then 2,
yeah, exactly,
just not being able to run out games because we have such a young side.
Yeah,
but no, I genuinely think that round 24 game could be dangerous for the Suns. If Richmond jump them,
exactly.
they will probably miss finals altogether if they don't win that game.
And that's what I'm saying as well with the remaining fixtures. I don't think it takes home ground advantage into it because I can't see this being the easiest.
No, like
honestly,
if you're looking at
like
it on a team by team basis, then maybe it's the easiest. But the location is a big factor for the Suns this season.
Yeah, and even just any interstate team is just harder to travel as the year gets on.
Yeah,
you get a bit more tired. Yeah.
So I am just going to quickly run through both teams again. So Melbourne at the MCG round 20. I was actually offered by a friend to go to that game. Unfortunately, I already have plans that Saturday night, so I can't go. Which is sad because I actually would have wanted to see GWS in Melbourne because it'd be a really good game. Then we've got Hawthorn at Manuka Oval. Brisbane at the Gabba. I will actually be at that game. I'm very much looking forward to it. Then we got Freo at NG Stadium, and then the Western Bulldogs in Ballarat. And then for the Gold Coast Suns, it's the Brisbane Lions on the Gold Coast, West Coast at Optus, Essendon at Marvel, Melbourne on the Gold Coast, and then Richmond at the MCG.
Yep, it's it's definitely interesting for both teams, but I still back GWS to make it.
I expect GWS to make it, and I think the Suns probably 9th or 10th if they're lucky.
Yeah, if they're lucky, I'd say. Oh yeah, well I guess 10th is probably where I'm expecting, but I reckon there's still 3 wins from them. But yeah, there's just going to be a few teams on 12 that are going to miss out on finals. It looks like.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it's gonna be super super tight. Speaking of games that were tight, this one definitely wasn't. St Kilda and West Coast at Marvel Stadium. It was West Coast have not really travelled well at all this season. But St Kilda have started to come into a bit of solid form, and it's to their credit they blew West Coast away. So the scoreline was 17-11, 113, similar to the scoreline from Friday night's game, through 6-5-41. Tim Membry, long-standing veteran for St Kilda, he was pretty much their leading goal. He was their leading goal kicker and leading scorer across both sides. He kicked 5 goals from 23 touches, 11 contested possessions, 10 marks, 5 inside 50s, 10 score involvements, 20 pressure acts, and 436 meters gained. I am going to talk about this a little bit later on. But I thought West Coast had a solid midfield performance from at least 2 players, and I will talk about them specifically. And they had some pretty decent amount of forward entries. However, they were no match for Zach Jones and Cal Wilkie. They shut them down super hard. Zach Jones specifically finished with 26 disposals, 92.6% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 5 clearances, 10 score involvements, and 21 pressure acts. And Cal Wilkie, complete wall, 18 touches at 94.4% efficiency, 6 intercept possessions, 11 marks, 5 1%ers, and 100% time on ground. Complete defensive wall. You just completely shut down any forward entries that West Coast tried to get through from Jaden Hunt and Tim Kelly, who I will go into a little bit more detail in a second. But overall, yeah, it's just completely dominant from St Kilda. Tim Membry up forward is a brilliant move because, being a veteran, getting older, you can't really... Some players can't take that impact in a contest too often. So he pushed up forward a bit more. Jack Higgins had a bit of a quieter game. So like some of the tall forwards were able to stand up a bit better, especially with Ben King being out. Max, one of the two.
Max King.
Max King. Yeah, he's with Max. Fuck. Max King being out.
Ben King was sort of out in his game.
Yeah, so that's true.
It sort of goes.
With Max King being out with a leg injury, it allowed members to stand up and really take in that kind of forward role that he used to have prior to them getting Max King.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you mentioned Higgins, and because I accidentally did this right up as well. But yeah, Higgins was still good with a bit of pressure tackling inside forward 50, which the Saints were able to do, and West Coast literally didn't. I
Yeah,
don't know if you saw the stat. It's
was
got
actually
Oscar
looking at the
Allen.
stats. Oscar Allen did very little
Yeah.
this week.
No, I was going to say he got asked about it at the end of the game because, it was a 23-0 inside 50 tackle count towards the Saints. With, as I said, 6 players having multiple for the Saints. Membry having 6 and Higgins having 4. And, for West Coast, they all tied with 0.
Yeah,
So...
it's not a good look, which is interesting because all of those players now are currently playing for their futures now that they don't have a coach. So you want to try and show up, and which is why I want to talk about Jaden Hunt and Tim Kelly. Like, you know, Jaden Hunt had an interesting start to his career at the Demons, and then went home to West Coast. He's had a couple of quiet seasons because he was signed like during the pandemic era when they were really struggling for players. But I think this game has probably been the best that he's ever played for West Coast at this point in time.
Yeah, he's had a few, but I mean, it's going to be hard to really stack it up considering it's such a bad
It
game.
is really hard to like kind of really, really stand out and make an impact.
I was looking lightly, and Jane Hunt was actually like literally the only Eagle not in their forward line to get decent amount of score involvement. So, as I said, he did stand out in a pretty game.
And to be more specific in that standing out, 35 disposals at 82.9% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 8 intercept possessions, 8 marks, 7 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 5 score involvements, and 723 meters gained, which was highest of the round. Maybe highest of the round, but it was definitely highest of the game. And then Tim Kelly, strong on-ball game, had 24 touches at 83.3% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 5 clearances, and 18 pressure acts. So, like, there was at least some sort of midfield structure, but there was nothing at either end otherwise.
Wow. I would argue that all went one way, but no, I get what you mean. But as I said, it's so hard because I only saw this game from the stats. But as I said, there's just so much that's really damning for them.
Yeah, like St Kilda's midfield and half back line just kind of tore them apart. They had no way of getting into their forward line in the first place.
Exactly, and I just want to say a few that might like St Kilda's the Eagles, they couldn't keep the ball in their forward half. And the Saints were just able to dominate intercepts. They scored 90 points from turnovers. And the Eagles would score a nice 40 points from turnovers. But keen math observers would see the problem with that, with just 1 point being generated elsewhere, which was obviously stoppage.
I mean, to the Eagles' credit, they at least know how to play from turnovers. Like, that's something that they can work.
Every team just loses a bit from turnovers. Like, 40 points is above average, but like, I think most people are getting like 20 per game. You just expect that with the way football's being played.
Yeah, true.
And as I said, 1 point. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just 1 point.
Yeah, with
like, it just says we can't generate from set play.
We don't know what we're doing otherwise. Yeah,
exactly. I will say their defense though. The only other probably big thing was Freddie Hoff. At least stats wise, and from what I heard.
I was looking at the stats as well on Tom Barras, and I thought he was all right.
Yeah. I got that ring too. It's just on the next page. Because I said Freddie Hoff, Barras, and Jack Williams as well, the mid-season recruit, scoring 3 goals. But that's pretty much it that I could see from the game. Really disappointing, especially with the slight optimism from last week. St Kilda just, they played as if they were a normal team that liked scoring goals in games of football, which this year they haven't. So, a nice game for them.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely needed the kind of boostage, considering they still want to play finals, but it's very, very low chance of them making it.
They're even more mathematical than Adelaide are at the moment.
Well, considering they are sitting bottom 4, it is pretty much mathematically impossible. It's mathematically possible, but it's definitely not going to happen.
Wins as Adelaide, aren't they?
I think Adelaide has
Yeah.
one.
No, sorry, they've got the draw.
Yeah, they've got the draw.
So
they've
yeah,
got
they'll
that
need to
benefit.
win out and have a bit of luck, I think. So
Yeah, it's not entirely.
Yeah, winning out would give them.
It's not
12.
entirely in their favor, especially when the teams that they're playing for their run home are all above them, apart from Richmond.
Yeah, have you got that up at the moment?
I do actually. I do want to quickly mention before I talk about it though, is that Liam Henry was the only injury from that game, left knee. I don't think it was like an ACL or anything, but it might have just been a cork. I don't know. But he seems.
Yeah, he's out for the year.
I knew it was long term, but I don't think it was like an ACL or BCL. But it was still pretty rough.
It's just with 5 rounds left, Yeah,
there's no point in trying to risk it anyway.
Wow, assuming St Kilda miss finals. Assuming.
Quote unquote assuming. But speaking of their run home, they are very, very lucky because all 5 of their last games are at Marvel Stadium. However, they are up against 2 co-tenants in Essendon and Carlton. Then they host Brisbane, Richmond, and Geelong at the same time, even though it's technically a Richmond home game for some reason. Whereas I feel like our game against GWS that we played like 2 weeks ago at the MCG should have been played at Marvel, and this game should have just been St Kilda's home game, or we should have played this at MCG.
As you mentioned, contractually obliged, but it's just weird that sort of ended up happening.
I understand the whole contractual obligation, but why does it have to be against a team that already calls Marvel Stadium their home? I don't know.
No, I get you.
But yeah, so Essendon at Marvel Stadium, Brisbane at Marvel, Richmond at Marvel, Geelong at Marvel, and Carlton at Marvel. It is, considering it is their home ground, apart from Essendon and Carlton being co-tenants, it is definitely all winnable games to some degree for St Kilda. I think Brisbane, Essendon, and Carlton, they will probably struggle with the most because they are the most informed teams. Richmond honestly could go either way, especially with how we've been kind of performing. However, currently we do not have Nankervis. He should be back by the time this game comes around anyway, but who knows what could happen. Like, this season's been weird enough as it is. And then Geelong, again, they're also in weird form.
I think Geelong will struggle.
They always seem to struggle a bit.
It's not a gimme.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, could be another 50-50 game. So one that St Kilda should win, but might not. Who knows? And then for the Eagles,
mathematically guaranteed not to make finals.
Yes. However, the highest they could punch up is 16th, maybe 15th if they get lucky. Either way, they're going to stay bottom 4. I don't think they kind of get a choice in that regard. Kind of the hand that they've been dealt.
Yeah, because they can't overtake St Kilda. So, because Adelaide's got the draw separating, so they would be stuck bottom 4.
Yeah. So the remaining games for the West Coast Eagles is Freo at Optus, another derby this week. A very, very exciting derby where Freo are probably going to trounce them, but who knows? Things
had that last time.
That's true. Weirder things have happened. Then we got the Gold Coast Suns at Optus, the second edition of the Coast to Coast match.
Yeah, it could be a spoiler match for the Eagles, but it's one they would want to win. Those 2 weeks are probably the important weeks. With North Melbourne at Blundstone Arena, just to prove that they can do stuff.
And then they've got Carlton at Optus. Carlton should win that pretty convincingly, considering different forms. But West Coast have done weirder things, as we've mentioned. And then Geelong in Geelong. Geelong should win that convincingly, but Geelong have also been shown to be beatable in Geelong at the same time. But on West Coast form, you don't expect them to kind of show up.
Like the West Coast, so they've all been top 8 losses-ish, depending on what you call top 8.
Them kind of jumping Freo definitely was not something people kind of envisioned, but West Coast definitely staying bottom 4. St Kilda have a possible chance of breaking out of bottom 4, but it's minimal.
Yeah, they just want to get some semblance of respect in a year where, for the most part, they've sort of lost it in the league.
Considering they were not trounced, they were kind of hyped up to hopefully play finals and build on their brief little finals campaign that they did last season, this has been a disaster for them, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they are probably the most disappointing team of the season. Like, most would also say Richmond, but you also can look at Richmond's massive injury list, and you kind of give them benefit of the doubt.
Saying Richmond, I think people are being fairly reasonable on them. It depends where Collingwood exactly finish up. We'll talk about that.
True, yeah. If Collingwood don't finish top 8, then they could be the most disappointing team. But I don't know. I think St Kilda are definitely kind of top of that right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, Collingwood's had good games. That's St Kilda have, but it's a lot less.
All right, where do we want to go next? Do we want to talk about Geelong and the Doggies, or do we want to talk about the Hawks and the Pies?
Yeah, I'll get Geelong and the Doggies because, as I said, we both accidentally sort of done notes for a couple of these.
I didn't put down much for this game because there wasn't really much to talk about.
Yeah, mine's like a paragraph.
Go for it.
I did put some colourful language in. Old school mud bowl, where the team sides met, and despite the Cats rocking the retro Guernseys, it would be the Dogs that dominated this old school contest. As the tough conditions were probably the only thing that was keeping this contest close. I would say in terms of the contest, I think the Cats were probably the second biggest losers in territory behind West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I was meant to mention before that St Kilda absolutely dominated territory against West Coast if you look at the maps. Bulldogs sort of did the same thing to them. Shots were very sparse for Geelong. They only got 39 inside 50s and taking 4 marks inside 50, where the Dogs were sort of playing tolls as if it was Saharan dry at Goomba, with Norton, Waitman, Uguagan all getting 3 each. That's marks inside 50s and getting 7-1 between them, with Uguagan obviously getting 4 of those in a very good game for him. The reincarnation of Rory Lobb would prevent from Cameron getting into the toll actions. He restricted him to 6 disposals, 1 goal, 1, whilst getting a nice 14 intercepts for himself, with 6 of those intercepts being intercept marks, which made him round leader, tied for both categories.
Not to mention, he also finished with 21 touches, 95.2% efficiency, and 100% time on ground.
Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty hard working. And as you, for those who don't know, he's playing as a backman now.
Yes. It's very experimental when they initially started it because, you had Ugelhagen and Norton up forward, and that was kind of becoming a bit cramped for all of their tolls. So when they had some backline injuries, Rory Lobb was tried at the back, and maybe he's meant to belong there all along because he looks really good down there.
I don't know. It's so weird because, as I said, he's not like someone like I don't know, like the biggest example for my mind is like a Brennan Cox, where, you've got someone who probably could have played forward if it was a bit more athletic. But, this is Rory Lobb. He's got athleticism and talent to boot. Obviously, it doesn't quite work into consistency, but, it's not the sort of player I would, pick to play back, but he's been doing it absolutely fantastically. And, a lot said about his efforts, but I'm pretty sure he keeps himself in pretty solid shape, despite all this. So, I would work around. The hardworking mids would also enjoy rewards. Ed Richards, Bontempelli, and Treloar getting 5 goals free and 24 free score involvements collectively, as Richard and Bontempelli would dominate the ground game in the wet, with 12 ground ball gets each. And despite it being fairly even for both teams, only the Dogs would turn contested wins into solid movement chains. The only positive for the Cats were the continued efforts of mature age recruit, Mana.
Yep, I had him down. He was the only Cat that I had down in my notes. He was the only one that stood out.
Yeah. I did say, despite not being as effective as usual, I think the Tom Stewart in the midfield, again, probably experiment, is still working. As both actually led the clearances for Geelong, with Manor getting 8 and Stewart getting 7. And yeah, I did hear that this was actually back-to-back wins at Goomba for the Dogs. Unless I misread that, because that's not that usual. They hadn't had a win up until these last two, if I'm correct with that.
You might be correct. I remember hearing it somewhere that like the other game that they played here was like their first one. I can't remember.
Yeah, but as I said, like this was an absolute territory trouncing. Um, a bit of I can't even really say accuracy because obviously, it was a very wet and trying conditions, but just the generation they were able to put in. I think 7-6 honestly flattered Geelong. Sort of like the Eagles game. Or no, sorry, not the Eagles game. Actually, Eagles game.
No,
Yeah.
it was pretty much the Eagles
Um,
game. Scores very similar.
yeah, yeah, it was honestly it didn't even quite show the amount of disparity between the two teams. Which as I said, is a bit disappointing. Is there anything you want to talk in terms of general play or what you thought about it?
No, not really. I mean, you did already touch on Treloar and Bontempelli. Again, Bontempelli with another Brownlow performance. Like, he's probably going to get the 3 votes yet again.
Probably. Yeah, that or Ed Richards. I was sort of
yeah,
I
think Richards might steal a couple votes from him, but either way, like he's still putting up insane numbers. Like you can't count him out.
No, exactly.
But it's like when you look at Carlton and Patrick Cripps having Brownlow performances, and then you have Sam Walsh right there stealing votes from him at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, Ed Richards, I think he was more of the general, what do you call it? He was more of the tackling pressure mixed with forward movement where, as was mentioned, Bontempelli was just so smooth on such dreary conditions. Getting the ball into his hands, getting it forward for his midfield. So
yeah, as you mentioned earlier, like 8 clearances, 7 score involvements, 15 pressure strikes, 8 1%ers for Bontempelli, which is insane.
Yeah. 19 contested possessions, which as we've found out is semi a lie. I haven't brought it up yet, but I've recently learnt, my dear listeners, that loose ball gets counting contested possessions, which has absolutely rocked my world. But yes, I don't think that should concern you when we say that. When you get 19, that's still very impressive. But yeah, as I said, so but yeah, generally in the way you tend to get a few more loose balls. Players tend to knock the ball forward a bit more, but yeah, as I said, one was actually mentioned. I was reading about this was apparently he had a lot of solid knock-ons, which don't really get recorded.
No, it's
I
not
think
really
they get
much
it
of a.
1% at
It's not
best.
really much of a stat. It's more of just a thing you watch.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it just goes to show how smart he is in what he does, and it's not always just him trying to get the stats. It's him doing the best thing for the team at any given situation.
Exactly right. Now to look at their run home, Geelong have North Melbourne at Blundstone, Adelaide Crows at home, Freo at Optus, St Kilda at Marvel, and the West Coast Eagles at home. All technically very winnable games. However,
yeah, I would say this is probably actually the easiest fixture coming home.
The downside is that Geelong's current form isn't the greatest. There's a lot of issues that they need to work out, like their midfield especially. The fact that they didn't really have anyone of note that stood up apart from Manor and a little bit of Tom Stewart is not very good at all. It shows how well they can be shut down, especially in their forward line. Like for the fact that they took out Shannon Neal, who I thought had a great game last week, week before, and then only had Cameron up there, and he got completely shut down. It's not a great.
Yeah, it's sort of reverse thinking, really, because you understand the thought process, it being a wet game, but as I said, the Bulldog showed as long as you have a bit of speed, you can still present fairly well.
Yeah, and that's what people love about Ugle-Hagan is that he's tall, but he's fast.
Yeah,
and that's why wet or dry, he works really, really well in that forward line.
No, exactly, and I think Geelong just took a bit too many pieces away.
I think they're definitely going to try and bounce back against North, but North could 100% surprise them. Adelaide Crows at home. Crows could absolutely surprise them as well. Freo at Optus. Freo should win that. But, stranger things have happened. St Kilda at Marvel. That's a 50-50 game right off the bat. And West Coast at in Geelong. Geelong should convincingly win that. Round 24, they should have most of their pieces back that they've been wanting.
Yeah, they only need a win to at least theoretically being on 11-7. And yeah, as you mentioned, they get the pieces they want by the end, especially when you get to St Kilda Eagles. So
yeah,
even at the worst case scenario of losing 2 of these first 3, which is what you'd expect in the realms. Losing all 3 would be a disaster.
Well, they might be sitting top 8 at the moment, but there is no real guarantee that they're going to stay there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, for Geelong, they want to be reaching for top 4, and they've got a perfect chance to. But yeah, I said if they lose all 3, they would have just blown a good chance to get at least a home finals, whether that's top 4 or 6 or 7.
And the scary thing is that they can lose to North. North might still be bottom of the ladder, but they are very, very scary with what they just pulled off against Carlton.
Second bottom on the ladder.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
I know.
Adelaide, Freo, St Kilda should be much closer games. But North Melbourne is going to be, I think, their most scariest. Just because North actually has signs of consistent form. They just haven't been able to win.
Yeah. Especially in this part of the season. Like West Coast, if they've got no positional changes in the ladder to get, that could be an opportunity for them. But yeah, I said, I still reckon they should make finals. Western Bulldogs are the most interesting, I think.
Absolutely.
This is anything can happen territory.
They've got they're doing a bit of traveling against teams that they could absolutely surprise. Like Sydney at the SCG, Melbourne at Marvel. That should be a doggies win. Adelaide Crows at Adelaide Oval will be very, very interesting clash. Melbourne at Marvel will also be an interesting clash, especially if North play how they played against Carlton. It will definitely make it a much more interesting game to watch. And then GWS in Ballarat, as we touched on earlier with the GWS game. Again, Dogs play really, really well in Ballarat. They're used to that cold environment pretty well. Not really many people beat them down in Ballarat either. So it's should at least be like an easy tick.
Well,
for them
that's what I'm saying. Like this game was huge for the Bulldogs because if they were sitting 9 and 9. I wouldn't expect them to make finals, but now it's actually dipped it a lot. Because I would say 3 wins is not expected, but fairly reasonable.
Well, who would you expect? You'd go Melbourne, North, and the Giants, or would you go Melbourne, Adelaide?
I say would expected wins, and I could see them getting both Adelaide and the Giants, but I expect that to be a 50-50 split. But honestly, as you said, like the Bulldogs' top form, you could see them getting 5 wins, but it's just not how they play.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Sydney is the most likely to just completely shut them out. Melbourne could surprise them. Adelaide's probably a bit thorn of their side too. I think they'll get it comfortably against North and the Giants. They don't like resistance coming defensively the other way, so that's the biggest thing. Whether Melbourne and Adelaide can tool what they have, because we've seen both of them be defensively good in parts, but especially in the case of Melbourne, be defensively awful. So, we'll wait and see that. But yeah, definitely one of the most exciting ones. Probably not for fans. I'd much rather like an easier run home. But,
very true.
They've got control of their own destiny. If they make finals, they'll deserve it. And they've got a decent shot at it.
Yep, I pretty much agree with that. All right, let's head over to the MCG, where it was a very, very, very wet game, as it was in Geelong. And we talk about Hawthorn and Collingwood. As some like to put it, the Jack Ginnivan Cup, as it's now known. where he put on an absolute show against the Pies. I will talk about his stats specifically in a moment, but like I watched a lot of this game on my phone because I was out at the time. But just what I saw from him through the middle, and what I saw, like him and Connor Nash, like that's a really strong duo. Then you've got Will Day in there as well, who pretty much stepped up as soon as he came back from injury. Like that Hawthorn midfield is so stacked now. It's insane. And
it just links up with the forward line so well.
Yeah, it does. Especially when you have players that they can even rotate through the forward. Like, occasionally they'll move Sicily up forward, and like currently they have Blake Hardwick up there, which I've been very, very glad that they've kept him there. But like occasionally they'll swap those two around, as we talked about last week, because Sicily has issues with his shoulder. So it's been really interesting to watch, and just Ginnivan. As much as people give him a hard time over like the whole dropping the knees thing and stuff like that, and as a Richmond supporter, when he was playing for Collingwood, kind of had to give it to him. It's kind of in the nature of that rivalry.
I mean, look, that was completely neutral, and like he annoyed me a bit. I didn't mind him after the game and all that, but he's just a kid and all of that. But he definitely like you can enjoy it as a neutral, but when playing against your team, you just hate to see him.
He knows how to play it up for the cameras, for one. Like it's not just him, being a footballer. He's a bona fide star. Like
he's an entertainment package.
Yeah, it's like a slightly younger Toby Green, pretty much. Knows how to play it up for media.
Yeah.
And then so his stats specifically were 31 touches, 11 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 11 score involvements, 5 tackles, 17 pressure acts, a 2-1 scoreline, and 417 meters gained. He was very, very dominant in ground ball gets, especially because it was a wet game. And his transition through mid to forward was brilliant.
Yeah, so that link up was pretty much strong all day. Like, I will say it was very brave of Collingwood not to defend the half forward line, all night, and it was even braver to then not defend anything forward of the ball, after that. Honestly, as I said, it was made easier by some of Collingwood's defensive efforts, but. Also, there was just a lot of, like, we've seen it before. We know this isn't a fluke or, them just picking up a bad matchup. This is great.
No, this is an issue that Collingwood has had pretty much all season.
Who probably benefited. I'm not sure if you're going to mention him in stats, but Dylan Moore as well, floating between the wing and half forward.
No,
he was
I did
another
not
one that just
him.
went through unchecked. I'll just mention his stats. 27 possessions, 75% disposal efficiency. 10 ground ball gets and 10 score involvements along. Oh, sorry, it's just solitary behind for him, but he was just involved in a lot of scoring. As I said, Collingwood just sort of allowed good entry because they didn't defend anyone in that area.
No,
it was just so easy.
They were guarding grass for some reason. Like they just let Hawthorn roam free in their forward line.
Yeah, it was honestly one of the most undisciplined defenses. It's like it's such a weird turnaround from last year where they were winning games off defense, but I'd say this was one of the worst defensive performances from them.
And then
I'll stop interrupting your analysis.
Speaking of defensive performances, I have to shout out Sicily. Like he is the difference maker. Like we've talked about this multiple times now. When he's out, Hawthorn's defense does not look very good. It doesn't look very joined. He's kind of like the Jake Lever of Melbourne. Like when you have that key personnel down the back who isn't just barking orders or anything like that, but he's literally the glue that keeps you together. Like it's a massive difference. And like him in the back line, Will Day in the midfield, and Hawthorn are literally one of the most, I wouldn't say unstoppable teams, but they are in extremely dangerous. As long as
there's not enough young links to be vulnerable, but of course. They're getting the most out of players and they're playing smart. covering up their own weaknesses. That's what you said. It's like, why is Sicily so important? Is, I said it complements someone like Sam Frost. Sam Frost takes the tallest threat, allows Sicily to roam around, and when he does, he just has so much influence.
And you see it in the stats, like 30 touches at 76.7% efficiency, 10 intercept possessions, 6 marks, 4 score involvements, 4 1%ers, and 604 meters gained. He's like, considering he was initially in doubt because of his shoulder, like
exactly.
He's just a hard worker all across the board. Could possibly be captain of the year. I'm not gonna lie, like he's made that much of a difference with how Hawthorn has been. Like, granted, that's also could be part of their coaching staff, and like they've made some structural changes throughout the midfield and the backline anyway.
That's something I haven't considered, but yeah, I can see it.
Like he has made that much of a difference. I think it's pretty fair to say. Like, whether we would give Sam Mitchell Coach of the Year, that remains to be seen, because you kind of lean still towards Horse just because of where Sydney have been all season long.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to probably give Hawthorn the benefit of maybe being the most improved team of the season.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no doubt. We've seen some turnarounds, but what Hawthorn's been able to do with a list that almost everyone said, no, you need more in it to perform, and Sam Mitchell just said no. Like, this is the team, and they're playing like the team.
Yeah, exactly right. Sorry. And Connor Nash, I did mention him briefly before. I thought he had one of the best games of his career, I'll be honest. Completely stood out, apart from, obviously Sicily doing all the work and Ginnivan being absolute star. When you look at, like, just, the sort of players you don't really talk about all that often, I think Nash had a brilliant performance. 29 touches.
I would argue it was last week, but yeah, as I said, back to back, he's a insanely good week.
He has put up some insane stats over the past few games. 29 touches, 13 contested possessions, 8 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 8 score involvements, 8 tackles. A lot of 8 there. 22 pressure strikes and 443 meters gained. Again, yeah, like that midfield just does a lot of hard running, and it's insane what they can pull off. And not to mention, like, even players who don't normally get involved in massive scoring, like Jarman Impey, he even got involved in the forward line a bit. He managed to push up. Collingwood just couldn't shut them down at all.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, a few other players, like Massimo D'Ambrosio, he got 2 goals just from being unchecked.
Granted, he got 5 goals like a couple of weeks back, so it's like he's a very sneaky player.
I know, but as I said, he was playing on sort of that wing role, not quite forward, not quite.
Was he on
wing.
Side bottom?
No, he was following Dacos around.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
Actually, Dacos was involved, but made a lot of errors as well.
Both of them, for that fact. When I looked at the Collingwood stats, they were the 2 on top, but their stats weren't really all that impressive either.
No, well, I mean, it's, what we turn around and say with Collingwood is, you don't even have to shut them down. Like, if you can keep them honest and keep it contested, you can sort of mitigate a lot of their star players. We've seen it Dacos. Like, I think last 2 weeks he hasn't been as bad as the weeks before that when he was getting hard tag, but still not as damaging. Obviously, it doesn't help that the team around him isn't giving him much support. But yeah, Josh as well. He's more of the cream on top player, but it's just been asked to do that much. Like, I think he's been a part of the problem, but definitely hasn't helped with some of his defensive efforts. He's definitely more forward focused.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they just need a bit more run back, because yes, it is absolutely. Yeah, as I said, what worst defensive Magpies performance I've seen all the year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But 2 shout outs, some Collingwood players who I thought had decent performances, maybe not super standout as they would normally be, but good enough to talk about. Jordan Ngoe, I thought I actually had a pretty solid game. 16 touches, 11 contested possessions, 11 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 4 score involvements, a goal, and 568 meters gained. So he was doing a lot of hard work in the midfield, but it just wasn't getting enough of conversion rates when going inside 50.
Yeah, it was pretty good when Collingwood were trying to bring it back from, because they got a bit of junk time. Like again, this could be a lot worse too. Uh, there's a lot of games like that this week, but yeah, definitely lifted after having the F start. But yeah, it was very important when they were getting things going.
I just realized that I didn't actually mention the scoreline at all. So it was 2013 133 to 913 67, which is why we're talking so much about how rough Collingwood looked in comparison to Hawthorn.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, it was wet weather footy, but normally wet weather footy games result in low scores, not over 130 points.
Yeah, no, exactly. Honestly, it probably made it worse.
I just realized because that the final scoreline actually equals 200. 133 plus 67 equals 200.
Doing a lot of math today.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just something I spotted.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
Honestly, it slipped past me. Sorry.
All right, it's all good then. Then I'm just going to briefly talk about Darcy Cameron because he did just win out in the rock battle by a slim margin. But he had 39 hitouts with 13 to advantage, 15 touches, 12 contested possessions, 6 clearances, 9 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 20 pressure acts. So, decent stats for a ruck. Some rucks really struggle to do a lot of around the ground sort of work, but Cameron does it really, really well.
And it was a fun battle too with Lloyd Meek. Yeah, both were pretty impactful. Probably arguably Collingwood's best player by memory.
Especially lately, I think Cameron is. Yeah, he's done a lot of the hard work in the ruck.
It's just consistency week in, week out. It's what you want.
Exactly right. And then just to wrap it up, Nathan Kruger sadly suffered concussion during this match. He was in the first half as well, so it didn't help Collingwood's chances at all in terms of forward pressure. Granted, that wasn't really much of that anyway. So that's unlucky for him. He will miss this week and next week. But
yeah, oft-injured player, so hopefully he can come back. I don't think he's had as much concussions though, so I can't remember.
No, I'm pretty sure he's had a pretty decent run of it, thankfully. All right, let's talk about their run home. So we have Hawthorn first, and their run home is actually pretty interesting. Definitely, they're all winnable games for them too. So they've got Adelaide in Adelaide, GWS at Manuka, Carlton at the MCG, Richmond at the MCG, and North Melbourne as what seems to be a traditional final Tassie game of the season against the two teams that call Tassie home.
Well, I think when they were making it, they might have been thinking this was a possible spoon bowl, but yeah, as I said, could have some implications for Hawthorn.
Didn't they play this game last season at the same time? Or is it because I know North played their final game of the round last season in Tassie, but I can't remember if Hawthorn was the team they played against.
No, it wasn't North. Remember, North won against Gold Coast. That prevented them getting bottom spot.
That's right. I'm just gonna.
I think North Hawthorn did play a Tassie game though to finish it. I can't remember.
I'm gonna check the app. Just because it's gonna bother me now.
Yeah.
But yeah. So their run home is 100% winnable all 5 games. I will be honest.
Carlton at the MCG is the biggest standout, but their form, I mean, look, as I said, I think they're the second most formed team over the last couple of months behind Brisbane.
Okay.
Unquestionable.
We were right in the fact that North did play a game in Tassie in round 24. It was against the Suns. It was in Hobart. But Hawthorn's final game was at the MCG last season.
Oh.
So, wrong in that regard.
Yeah, no. Yeah, as I said, yeah, it really depends Adelaide too. I don't think Adelaide will win, but again, that will be it.
I think Adelaide will make it close.
Yeah. So it's really how 21-22 goes for them. You would expect 3 wins of the sum of them to be pretty good, and that should get them, again, 13 wins, low percentage. They'll be very unlucky. I don't even know if it's possible to miss finals with 13 wins, but if any year was going to be it, this might be it.
It'll be purely based on percentage if that is the case. Because, you expect them to beat North. You expect them to beat Richmond, and then fair chance they could probably beat the Giants.
So that gives them half a chance.
Yeah.
Well, not really. Too low percent. But anyway, yeah, as I said. But you would expect the way the Hawthorn's going to pinch at least one of them. I'll be surprised if they get 4, but geez, I wouldn't want to be facing them if they did get 4.
No, I think
that would be ridiculous.
I definitely think Adelaide could surprise them. But with Adelaide's now missing Dawson and Butts, and they're still missing Rankin, it's not looking great for them.
Yeah, I more want Adelaide to try and prove themselves against Hawthorn than me expect them win. Yeah.
And then, Giants, well, being that it's technically a rule game, that could also go just either way, I'll be honest. Carlton at the MCG, that'll be game of the round, honestly.
Yeah.
Especially if like Hawthorn go into that round like on high, like coming off of really good wins, but
Yeah. Because again, it like any situation, if they go 2 wins, they'll be setting themselves up. And yeah, so if they get the 1 win, the win against Carlton, well, Carlton would probably guarantee it if they win that. And yeah, no wins, stopping the rock. But yeah, I wouldn't expect that to happen, but you never know.
Yeah, we never know. And then yeah, Richmond at the MCG, I think they'll just run us out like they did last time. And just completely outshoot us. And then North Melbourne in Tassie, specifically in Launceston, this one. They both favour this ground pretty highly, but I think Hawthorn just has a better track record.
Yeah.
And they're also better form. So
yeah, North.
So do we want Hawthorn to make the 8? Yes. I think it would be great to see them make the 8.
I like their list.
Is it likely? More likely than not. But it does also depend on their percentage for one and how some other teams fare up.
Yeah. Look, honestly, I think percentage isn't too bad. It really depends how the draw teams go.
Yeah, that's true. There are 2 draw teams up there, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, I can't be bothered predicting, but yeah, I would say 13 wins. Just considering teams tend to play each other and they can't all get 3 wins. Will sort of even itself out.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, Collingwood have a really hard run home, surprisingly. Well, I mean, actually, it's not all that surprising considering they were the reigning premiers. But their current rate of form, this just makes it all the more harder for them. So thankfully, for them, they only have to travel once in the next 5 weeks. The rest of the games are at the MCG against the usual blockbuster teams that they would face at the G. Apart from Brisbane, I guess. But Brisbane are also in good form, so who knows what could happen there. But they've got Richmond at the MCG this week, which, honestly, with Collingwood's current form, we could surprise them, but we also don't have a ruck.
Yeah.
Because Mankervis is out with concussion. So that would be very surprising. Carlton at the MCG, Carlton on form should beat them. Sydney at the SCG, Sydney should beat them up there. I say should. You never know.
Yeah.
Brisbane at the MCG will be very interesting because it's a good question for Brisbane to see whether they're fit for finals in terms of being able to actually just play on the MCG. And then Melbourne at the MCG could also go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like last year's 2nd, 4th, and what was it, 6th on the list?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so, absolutely crazy. Oh, and last year's 5th too, if you count Carlton.
Yeah, 4 of these 5 teams that they're facing up against did finish top 8 last season.
Yeah, it's a crazy finish. And yeah, they need to win 4 to get the equivalent of 13 wins because they've got 2 draws. So yeah, with the percentage they have to win 4 basically, in my mind. And yeah, I just can't see it happening.
No, neither do I. I definitely think they will miss, which, as we talked about before, it could make them the most disappointing team of the season, considering they are the reigning premiers. Yeah. But we look at Richmond of 2021 and Geelong of 2023, they had very similar issues, is where they had a strong premiership run, and then the very next season they just floundered.
Well, they're saying it will be the first time it happens, back-to-back premiers missing out on the finals the year after, with Geelong doing it last year. So, yeah, it's a most likely case. So bust out your record books for this one.
Yeah, gotta note it down. Well, we're living through history at the moment.
Art of history. Yeah, always nice when it's against Collingwood rather than your team.
Absolutely. All right, you've got the next game, whichever one you want to go with.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about Port versus Richmond, and then we'll shuffle Sundays around a tiny bit. Tale of the season for Richmond. Really good signs for a future, as it took 3 quarters and a lot of effort for Port to finally outmuscle them in the last quarter. Before basically Port just got all control and romped away with it. All of Richmond's lines seem to be firing in the first half. Their defensive setup caught a lot of Port's entries and created some fast rebound football that broke Port's planes. The other way, again, Richmond love to do this. They love scoring off turnovers for the easy goals. And with Port's high press, that just allowed them to do that. The midfield and transition group were very good, winning clearances and having a lot of individual performances, like Hopper, Presta, and especially Daniel Rioli. Although they were, again, poor defensive efforts from Port, contributing to some of the scoreboard directly. And this would end up with, Richmond getting, I think, a bit of a shock lead in part of it. I think mainly in the first, but actually sort of culminated in Ken Hinkley giving the midfield group a baking at half times. As I said, most likely due to the defensive efforts going back the other way. And in the second half, this would actually set Port up. And credit to Richmond for only getting smashed in the fourth, because I thought Port actually started the comeback a lot in the third quarter. Their Tolls got involved into it. Mitch Georgiadis and Charlie Dixon would stand their authority into the game, as Port generally just had the arsenal to smash their marks inside 50, as, they were a bit lucky the other way that turnovers weren't going to dangerous stop forwards, because unfortunately Richmond don't have that at the moment. And they would win the inside 50 marks 20-6, and they would just own territory and win out the game 16-20, 116 to 11-9, 75. As you mentioned earlier, it didn't help that Toby Nankervis was what I thought was a tentative sub off. Looked a bit sore after a knock on. So it's a bit, I think it still remained to be unseen whether he will be up for next week.
No, I believe he was ruled out with concussion, sadly.
Oh, it was concussion, was it?
Yep.
I didn't actually know
I had to
that.
look at it afterwards.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, as I said, well, definitely won't be. But yeah, and said he had a pretty decent battle with Jordan Sweet. He was very solid up against him. Both players were. And as I mentioned, it was very hard because one of Port's standout defensive players, Zerk Brendan Thatcher, gave Jacob Kazitsky an absolute bath. And their lack of tolls gave Aaliyah the license to roam around. And I'll finish because I was going to say the individual player performance. I thought we could do that together.
Yeah, go for it. Not that I have anything up, but go for it.
No, it's okay. But finish the night with a strange fact that you might like. Port sub Quinton Narkle had impact late but couldn't convert, as he claims the highest behind generation per time on ground of all multiple game behind kickers.
You want to know the even funnier thing about this stat? Is that in the off-season for the supplemental selection period, he trained with Richmond. Okay. And we didn't pick him up, which is why Port got him.
Yeah. But I was going to say there's even more connections. As I said, he got 4 behinds from 27% time on ground, 3 in the space of like 5 minutes. And do you know who we took over this record from?
Was it Ivan Soler?
No.
I was just naming former Richmond players at that point.
No, it's actually Jacob's cousin, Justin Kazitsky. You got 4 from 29% on ground in 2003 against Freo.
Damn, that is a wild
So,
connection.
yeah, exactly. So a bit of fun there. Yeah, in terms of players that performed, as I said, it's to be what you expected. Charlie Dixon ended up feasting late when defense sort of broke down. Richmond got a bit tired. Kicked 4 goals too. A lot of those ended up fairly late. Connor Rozee, in terms of the midfield group, very class. He had 24 possessions, but 8 score involvements, 13 contested possessions. Aaliyah, who I mentioned earlier, 10 intercepts. I also want to specifically mention Daniel Rioli. I think he was the best for Richmond and a fantastic
He was
game.
deemed best on ground in our own sort of little like community metrics as well.
Coaches ranking. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, he was 28 disposals, 10 intercepts, 7 ground ball gets, and 2 goals. And yeah, he was just especially early, but still continued on throughout the night. Travis Spoke, he didn't have the best. Oh man, he was actually pretty good, but he broke his behind streak yet. Well, he contributed yet again. He broke it last week, but he made it 2 in a row as he scored 1. Unfortunately, added 2 more behinds to the tally right after that. But he had a pretty good game. And yeah, as I mentioned, honestly, most of Freya's midfield was good. Shai Bolton, Liam Baker also had very good games. Shout out to both the Evans. Oh, sorry, both the Evans. Logan and Frankie. Logan is an extremely good mid-season pickup for us. I think actually Port's defense has gotten better with his inclusion. We're playing both the smalls, Logan Evans and Dylan Williams. But Logan Evans had a fantastic game. He had 22 disposals at basically 82% efficiency, and 8 score involvements as well. So his ball usage were 2 dangerous players, and he had some fantastic brave forward ball movement. Also, the early sub for Port, Frankie Evans, was also involved. That's why I chuck him in there. As you know, I tend to lump players with the same name together, even if they have nothing to do with each other.
Very true.
And yeah, also the other thing that was interesting with Frankie, Logan Evans, is that does make it interesting whether we will see the return of Ryan Burton, former high-rated Hawthorn pick, who went to Port and is struggling to find his place. So, yeah, at least Port's form's a bit flaky, but they've got some players that they can shuffle around with, and we'll try and find a bit of cohesion down back. But yeah, as I said, honestly, stats-wise, for both teams, it was very team performance based. I was very impressed at the setup because, most times I'm thinking, oh, Port, you bang their head against the wall with some of their forward entries and all that. But honestly, I thought it was all right this game. I just think Richmond defended really well. A lot of hard effort. It's just not much you can do. But as I said, Richmond got tired. Eventually, the tackling rate just dropped off massively. They lost that count 70-47.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But yeah, as I said, they just seemed to be getting a bit gassed. Port definitely had the leg speed to outrun them, so took advantage of that. And just took the last quarter to culminate into a victory.
Granted, I only got to see the highlights of this game because, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, I was out Saturday night, so I completely missed it. But I was very impressed from the highlights of what I saw. Again, as you've mentioned, like we were pretty much in it for a lot of the game, and again, that's what I like to see. Even if we're not winning games, we're still trying, we're still putting in that effort. We're showing that we have a decent game plan. It's just about cultivating the players to be able to learn it properly and use some of that momentum and education to go into next season as we continue our rebuild.
Do you want to go on a run home for both the teams?
Yep, I already have it up. So Port Adelaide we'll start with, currently sitting 7th on the ladder. They're coming up against Carlton at Marvel Stadium, Sydney Swans at Adelaide Oval, Melbourne at the MCG, the next showdown match, as we mentioned earlier, and Fremantle at Optus. All games are very dangerous for them.
Yeah, I think the plus side for Port is they only need a win too, theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah.
But yeah, according to Fox, this is the hardest, and I'd put it up there.
Yeah, because
Showdown can go either way.
Showdown's always been able to go either way, which is the great thing about like the Showdown and the Derby and stuff like that.
Yeah,
both teams always seem to get up for those sorts of games.
Melbourne should be the one, but again, that's away, so that'll be a bit difficult. But I mean, at the same time, if you can't win at least one of Carlton, Sydney, and Fremantle, especially since we have Adelaide, Sydney at Adelaide Oval, then like, what are you doing in finals anyway? So yeah, this will just keep Port honest. If they miss, it'll be a bit disappointing. But yeah, it's definitely possible. I think they're one of the most 50-50 teams to make it or not. You know, so wait and see.
Yeah.
And for Richmond.
It's a run that we definitely could lose all 5 games. I'm not gonna lie to you. Collingwood especially, I reckon we probably will lose, especially not having Nankervis out there this week.
Yeah.
Tristan Sherry and Nankervis will be a very interesting matchup at Marvel, provided Nank's all good to go. Honestly, I'm very much considering going to all 5 of these games. I know I'm going to at least 3 of them because they're all home games, being the St Kilda, Hawthorn, and Gold Coast. At least I think Hawthorn's a home game. If not, I might probably go anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna back Richmond to win at least one of these.
We definitely won't beat St Kilda. We might beat North Melbourne. But Hawthorn will definitely get us on the G. And if the Suns are going to win any game away from home, it could probably very well be against us. I'm going to be honest, as I mentioned before. Yeah.
Honestly, in terms of effort, I like Richmond's setup more than the Suns.
Oh yeah, no, so do I. And that's not even biased. It's just we don't get shut down very easily. I feel like our game plan is very different to a lot of, like, especially midfield. We don't get shut down very easily. It's just our forward line and our back line struggling at times. It just run out of legs half the time.
Yeah. Although I should say, it's always easier to say that after a Gold Coast loss, because when they lose, they look a bit But as I said, I'll back and win one. Whether that gets them out last, I don't think so. But I think they'll put a bit of respect on them.
There's also no guarantee that West Coast will win another game either. To be fair.
Yeah, it's just harder to overtake West Coast because they'll need 2 wins, won't they? West Coast on 4.
Oh no, West Coast are on 4. I meant North Melbourne. Granted, if North Melbourne beat us here, then we have no hope.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see. But I can't say the same about North, but I definitely think Richmond's lock in for one.
St Kilda have come into some decent form, and because that's at Marvel, that's a very dangerous game. They're probably going to beat us anyway, as I mentioned before. Again, Collingwood without Nankervis, Darcy Cameron will just roam free and do whatever he wants. Great, we'll probably put Samson Ryan on him, I would assume, because he's like our next ruckman, but it means we have to take him out of the forward line primarily, which is where he currently is, which isn't ideal. But our hand has been dealt. And then Hawthorn will trounce us. Suns could go either way, and North could go either way, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, so we're putting 1 win for Richmond, 5 wins for Port.
Sure. You are absolutely dreaming. No, honestly, both teams could go 1-4. That's the scary part.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah.
Which is
1 was crazy for Richmond.
Oh yeah. All right, Sunday games. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I have to do. I'm gonna have to do one back to back. So
go for it.
We'll probably start with the more boring one. I'll just get that out of the way. Finish it on a high note. So I'll start with Fremantle, Melbourne. In a close season, we often mention some of the doubles matchups can make or break entering the top 8 or even the top 4, as is the case of Freo. And Freo absolutely sent Melbourne reeling in these two encounters, taking 8 points, confidence, and possibly the season, as they would smash Melbourne around the ground, but specifically in both defensive half transition and clearances, as Melbourne would take the embarrassing statistic of losing first half clearances 24-3, which is the first time since this stat has been recorded that anyone has generated under 5 in the first half. So they cleared that metric by 2. As I mentioned, their defense was in absolute shambles. It may have actually been a worse defensive performance than Collingwood. With many players with free space ahead of the ball in either ball movement or their forward half matchups, which led players like Walters, Frederick, Tracy, Amison Young, and Brayshaw to score easily, as Lever struggled against the young forward Jai Amos. And as I said, the structure was just all off for Melbourne, who were lucky that they could at least defend from their stoppage deficit and got some fourth quarter junk time goals to lead to this game not rivaling the 90-point blowout that was at the NT. Apart from an early step up from Van Rooyen, the Freo's defense absolutely smothered the D's tolls. The only setback was, of course, Alex Pearce, seen to have hurt his injured shoulder and was subbed off at 3/4 time. I think this is still yet to be seen whether it's precautionary or a serious re-aggravation, but you absolutely hated to see it. The same happened with Luke Jackson. He hurt his knee after solidly backing up a great Sean Darcy. He feasted on Harrison Petty, who weirdly enough was actually probably Melbourne's best player for the night, as he was more focused on being useful post-tap. Obviously, you're not expecting Harrison Petty to win, so his setup is good to where
that's
just mitigating.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's the one downside of Melbourne, is that when you rely so much on Max Gawn, you're not really cultivating a ruckman to be able to take over him when he goes down. Exactly. Petty's decent, but that's not really his primary role in this team.
Well, I'd say Petty's taken to the challenge more than what most people would expect. But as I said, there's only so much you can do. As I said, as much as I thought Petty was okay, I'm about to run through these midfield stats. Brayshaw, 41 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 6 intercepts and 7 score involvements. Sarong, 36 with 15 contested possessions, 7 clearances, 8 score involvements and a goal. And Young got 28 with 13 contested possessions, 11 inside 50s, equal to the round high, 9 score involvements and 8 clearances. That is a middle of the ground smashing. As well, I'd like to mention. Oh, sorry, yeah.
It's without Petrarca, there is Melbourne's midfield doesn't really have all that much going for it. Clayton Oliver, sure. Jack Viney, sure. But he's
both of them, clearly lacking a lot of impact. I'd even say that maybe
maybe they brought Rivers in, and he's been great. I'm not gonna lie, he's actually been a really good standout. But Petrarca's always kind of been that big lifter in the midfield. Sorry, go on.
No, I was saying Trent Rivers was by far the best performance of that group. Oliver had a pretty mid game. Viney got involved in a bit, but his possession wasn't that good. And as I said, it just wasn't happening at all for that midfield unit. As I said, it was pretty dire. As I said, the other thing for Freo, there's another performer I'd like to highlight. Tracy would dominate the marks up forward and around the ground. He kicked 3 goals too, as I think he took 12 marks or something as well. I don't know why I didn't write. Yeah, he took 12 marks. Melbourne weren't just not allowed to mark the ball around the ground. They could only chip it around in their back half. So it was complete uncontested and contested domination. As I said, plus side for Melbourne was really youngsters. Van Rooyen, as I said, he still presented well. He kicked his 2 goals in close succession, but it was still useful. The limited forward amounts they got. Caleb Windsor and John McVie both had solid performances for the night. And Cade Chandler's forward pressure was also good, and he kicked 2 goals, 1 from minimal entries.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's about as much as I want to say. Like, it was similar to that 90-point smashing, just not quite in the scoreboard, which wasn't really Freo's fault. As I said, deep in the season, it's a bit harder to run out games as ruthlessly. But yeah, as I said, yeah, defensively shocking from Melbourne. Hopefully, maybe some of the junk line possessions, can get a bit there forward going. But yeah, they just really didn't have the opportunity in this game. Yeah, as I said, we'll go further on home for both these teams.
I do want to quickly, whilst we're talking about Freo, I want to talk about Nat Fife really quick, because I really like that he's definitely become, he's no longer, well, he's still the superstar that he always is, but like he's taken more of a team role rather than the sort of superstar individualistic sort of midfielder that he used to be. And it's and it's really helped to develop Fremantle into this unstoppable force to some degree.
Yeah. And it's sort of weird because, so like this game, it wasn't very contested, but it was involved in like a lot of link-up plays. Because, yeah, as I said, Melbourne really just outmatching the midfield. So all Fife needed to do was win a few of those balls, handed off to someone like Young or Sarong Brayshaw. And yeah, as I said, like he still got involved in it despite not having a 5 possession like game. As I said, he's still got 7 score involvements from his 17 possessions, and when 14 of those were handballs, he was still involved in the link-up plays. It's just, yeah, as I said, it's definitely a more distribution-focused than ball-winning role at the moment. And it still complements the way Freya's plays. So, yeah, you're right on that.
Yeah, and it's actually
very important.
Freo actually have become like a really, really fun team to watch because of it too.
Yeah,
and like
I said, I like the effect that
and
they
we've seen. Granted, we've seen
movement.
Yeah, exactly. And like we've seen we've seen Amos get shut down. We've seen Tracy get shut down. But like when your midfielders step up, your forward line flourishes.
Yeah,
and it's especially noticeable for Freo. And it's great to see Alex Pearce back out there as well. Like, not to mention, it was good to have him back in.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Especially in the Starlight game, he's had a lot to be involved in it. He was wearing a cast that was decorated in the
into the yellow and purple
colors.
Yeah, it was very nice.
He was great until he went down. But yeah, as I said, this wasn't the game. The footy god should have known better than to have that happen in that. So definitely the LVP of this game. Yeah,
for sure.
The script writers.
It was
not appreciated.
It was a bit of fate. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
All right. You all good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Run home time.
Yeah, we'll go on to the run home.
This week is another derby. We could be in for another West Coast surprise, or do you think they've just given up and Freo are just gonna run away with it this time?
Honestly, I can't see Freo not winning this. Yeah, they were dismal last week. And, it'll take a while before West Coast figure out what they want to do for the rest of the year. I think this will be another teething game.
Sounds good. Then you've got Essendon at the MCG. Oh, no, yeah, not for West Coast, but for Freo.
Yeah.
Then you've got Essendon at the MCG, Geelong at Optus, GWS at NG, and Port Adelaide at Optus. As we've already talked about prior. These are all very winnable games for Freo, like 100%.
Yeah, and they've got the draw to beat, so 2 wins actually puts them into getting like that higher home game region. I would say Freo are way more likely than not to make finals.
Do you think they'll be able to keep top 4?
Well, that's a bit iffy. I think they'll need to beat Essendon at the MCG, and then it becomes more likely than not. Despite my bias, I will say they should be favourites against Port Adelaide, and then Geelong at Optus is also very winnable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 3 would put them with a good chance to win it the way that this season's rounding up. I would say 3 wins gets them 4th or 5th.
Yep, I can agree with that. Yeah, it'll just be probably losing to GWS in New South Wales, and then the Port game could be a 50-50 game too, realistically. But Freo are more likely than not to win that one.
Yeah, I would say so. But, I mean, I'll probably try and get my way down there, so I'll be cheering against them, even though I would like Fremantle to get a bit of success this year. Just, obviously, probably more likely to be Port's finals fate riding on that game than Freo's.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then in terms of Melbourne's case, their entire run home is a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah, exactly.
Melbourne's form alone at the moment is not pretty. And then they go up against GWS, who are in some pretty solid form. The Doggies, who are in solid form. Port have finally found some form again, so that could be that'll be a dangerous game. I should mention GWS at the MCG, Western Bulldogs at Marvel, Port Adelaide at the MCG, and then they go up north to the Gold Coast to face the Gold Coast Suns. Which, if Gold Coast are going to keep winning at home, that's an instant loss for Melbourne, and it probably will be anyway. I'll be honest. And then Collingwood at the MCG for round 24 is, considering where both these teams are at the moment, very 50-50 game.
I hope it ends in a draw.
I hope it ends in a draw as well. That would be poetic.
I think at least for Melbourne fans, they'll find out in the first 3 weeks
whether they're playing finals or not.
Yeah, pretty much. Because as I said, if they win back-to-back Suns, Collingwood, which is still unlikely, but as I said, they'll need to muster a win against one of them. And as I said, but the form, the form of how they win and all that sort of jazz. But as I said, if they win too, which again, having 2 home games is slightly possible. They're in a good spot. But I think they'll need to win 2 out of the 3 of the first games to be likely to play finals. They'll need to win they need to win the first 2 home games for me to consider them likely.
Yeah, that's about right. All right, let's move on to the classic shootout at Marvel Stadium between Carlton and North Melbourne, a game that no one was expecting to be close, but it ended up being one of the most entertaining matches of the round. North Melbourne keeping Carlton honest, making it super, super difficult in terms of being able to let Carlton get away with a massive high scoreline. And to point out that fact, the scoreline by the end of the game was 16-11, 107 to 14-4, 88. However, by 3/4 time, the scoreline was 14-7, 91 to 12-2, 74. It was extremely close to the point where there was a lot of back and forth pretty much all day. Like, to North's credit, they're putting in a lot of hard work. Like, they may not be getting the wins for it, and Carlton may have been able to push away from them late, but this is what you want to. This is the least progress of what you want to see out of North. They're and I do want to mention, developing really well, and it's really good for them to carry on to the next season at the very least.
Yeah, and I want to mention I've been fairly critical with exactly how they've been getting their scores and some of the overall distribution. But I think this is a game where I've got to give them credit. Like, this was a very even performance. I only watched the highlights of it, but from the stats as well, these are players. They were getting a bit of score from defensive half, which they don't normally do. They converted some of their clearance work into stoppage goals, which was very good. And even some players that have been critical, like what's his name? Stephens.
Dylan Stephens, yeah.
Yeah. And there's one else that I want to mention.
Who are you blanking?
Yeah. No, I wanted to say, and also gaining someone back. That's what I wanted to mention. Griffin Logue in the back line. His first game after a year-long ACL tear, I think.
I think it was out with an ACL.
Yeah. So, no, absolutely. So, there's a few really good signs from this match. Probably more than other, as I said. But yeah, as I said, if I was going to be critical on North Melbourne with some of those, I definitely want to emphasize the praise I have, at least looking at this match.
Yeah, like like even if you don't look at the stats at all, just watching the game, it was really, really entertaining. And you always love a classic shootout. Like, yeah, like Carlton may have ended up scoring 11 behinds, but the fact of the matter is that goal for goal was pretty much what a lot of this game was about. It was really, really fun. I can imagine how insane the crowd would have been, just to be at that game alone, seeing it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, now let's run off a couple of players who I thought had great games. Charlie Curnow was one of them. He broke 50 goals for the season before quarter time, and then he turned it up after the half, kicking 4-2 from 15 touches for 80% efficiency, 9 marks, 8 score involvements. He was pretty much the key pillar up forward, with Mackay kind of roaming, pushing further up the ground. And then towards the end of the fourth quarter, Curnow pushed into the back line, which he sometimes likes to do, to give him a bit of a wall in case there's a late comeback. And yeah, it's pretty great that Carlton have that kind of flexibility with him.
Yeah, I would like the soon to be probably back-to-back
Coleman medalist.
What do you call it? Coleman medalist, yeah.
And then Captain Patrick Cripps, another Brownlow performance. Him and Bontempelli are 100% top 2 at the moment. I can't put it out of my mind that is the current case. I don't look at the Brownlow predictor or anything like that, but just you look at the stats week by week alone, it kind of details the story anyway. Especially when Sydney's kind of fallen off a little bit going into the later half of the season, but
yeah, I think there's too many split votes between Heaney and
Golden.
Well, Heaney, Warner, Gordon.
Yeah.
For me to back any of those.
Granted, like for Carlton, it'd be between Cripps and Walsh, but Walsh also missed a key amount of games at the start of the season.
Yeah, I'd say Cripps has mostly been the main one, but yeah, so we'll see.
And Walsh is probably going to miss a couple more weeks as well with another back concern. But anyway, I do want to talk about Cripps. 29 disposals at 82.8% efficiency, so he was very clean with the ball. 14 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 9 score involvements, 7 tackles, and 23 pressure acts. And then I want to talk about Adam Sard, who has only recently come back into the side over the past couple of weeks. I believe he was out with injury for a while. At least off my head, I'm pretty sure he hasn't been on the team for a while. But it's been great to see him out there just in general. He ran both ways off halfback and towards halfback when ball was going the other way. You know how it is. He collected 18 touches from 77.8% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 10 intercept possessions. No, sorry. Yes, 10 intercept possessions, 4 marks. I think that's meant to say. For some reason, I wrote intercept twice. So I think it's intercepted marks. 15 pressure acts, 4 tackles, a goal, and 538 meters gained. Overall, very, very strong performance from him. Again, I'm a big fan of the halfback runners. Daniel Rioli always has my heart for one.
Yeah.
And then
and especially important in this era, setting up good transition play, which seems to be a key for a lot of good teams this season.
And to be fair, my love of halfback runners stems from Basher Hooley.
Yeah, exactly.
He deserved a Norm Smith. It was very tragic that he didn't get one.
Absolutely.
But then just to talk about North for a bit, because again, it was a great game from them, despite kind of running a bit low in the fourth. But Bailey Scott had a great game. 25 touches at 88% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 5 inside 50s, 7 score involvement, 16 pressure acts, a goal, and 651 meters gained. Easily, probably their best on ground. I'm not going to lie. I thought he had a very big standout performance. Which, when you normally look at, your Wardlaws and your Sheasels, and Jai Simpkin, they were moderate. I wouldn't say moderately shut down. They all still had great games. But yeah, Scott stood up tall, and it's really great to see someone who's usually more of a, I wouldn't say underperforming player, but someone underrated player. There we go. That's the word.
Yeah, he's normally in that mid-region mix. He's not quite pushing into, as you mentioned, like, the top performances
And like
each week. But
he's not even 25 yet either. Like he's only 24, so he's still got plenty of years to be able to help with, like, develop with this side.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you're right. Like I said, of all the big ones, yeah, okay, you're about to mention him.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
I'm gonna talk about Sherry. Of course, I'm gonna talk about Sherry. Why would I not?
Mm.
Dominant in the ruck because Tom de Koning was having on and off issues all day with a foot injury. He did end up getting ruled out towards the end, which was very sad to see. But he tried his best. He was on and off out of the rooms pretty much all afternoon. But Sherry, 43 hitouts, 9 to advantage, 16 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 11 clearances, 5 score involvements, 10 tackles, and 19 pressure acts. Again, like I've talked about him for at length for the second half of the season. He's got to be at least in contention for possible All-Australian. He probably won't make it because they'd probably end up going to Brodie Grundy, let's be honest. Or it could, well, Brodie Grundy,
I don't know.
Sean Darcy maybe. I want to say Nankervis, but I don't think he's in the running just because of how Richmond has kind of looked the rest, like everywhere else. Yeah. But I think Sherry's done that much.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say Sherry's actually probably had less down games than Grundy, who admittedly has only had a few, but as I said,
it's very hard to have a down game as a ruck for Sydney though, when the rest of your midfield just looks insane.
Yeah. I think it's just, as I said, like splitting hairs between the top. It tends to separate the stuff around the ground, but yeah, Sherry always puts in an effort, and I hope he is seriously considered.
Yeah, I hope who knows, like he might even get North Melbourne's best and fairest, because I think he's generally had that good of a performance. And like it's very hard to get noticed for something like that, because normally like a midfielder's or like a halfbacker's award. But I think he's done incredibly well for the season that they've had.
Yeah, exactly.
And then as I mentioned before, Tom de Koning with a foot injury and Sam Walsh with a back injury. I don't know if de Koning will play this week. That'll be 50-50. And then Sam Walsh will probably be out for a couple. I think it might have only been back tightness though. Like it might not have been like a massive back complaint, but we shall see. Because I think that was the injury he was coming back from at the start of the season, off the top of my head. So it could make a massive difference. Let me find their run home. Found it right off the bat.
Yeah.
Okay. And their run home is looking pretty all right. For Carlton, it's Port Adelaide at Marvel, Collingwood at the MCG, Hawthorn at the MCG, West Coast at Optus, and St Kilda at Marvel. All 5 games, 100% winnable for them. Hawthorn, I think, could be the most dangerous one. And that's
I think
honestly that's
one
kind
trip
of about
out
it.
And it's one trip out and it's to the Eagles. They should be winning 3 if not 4.
Purely based on
I would
form,
say 3's the lower.
Carlton should win 4 out of 5. Like straight up.
Yeah, you would think so.
With Hawthorn, I think Port could be a danger game. And Hawthorn are definitely a danger game, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, they only need 1 or 2 wins to be,
they're top 2. Still, I don't think they're going to fall out of the 8.
They're the most luckiest of the top 4 teams behind Sydney. If luckiest is a word.
It's close enough.
Yeah. I said I'll lock them in.
And then for North Melbourne's run home, you've got Geelong down in Hobart, Richmond at Marvel, West Coast in Hobart, the Western Bulldogs at Marvel, and then Hawthorn in Launceston. I don't know what we could really say too much about them. They definitely have at least 1 winnable game for them here. The rest of the games, maybe 2. Again, that'll be Richmond and West Coast. But then, like,
you'd want them to win at least 1.
They could surprise.
If they don't, they'll win.
They could surprise Geelong.
That's the flop.
For the fact that it's being played in Hobart rather than being played in Victoria.
Yeah, well, Geelong did have that shocker in the Northern Territory, which suggests that maybe in those weirder grounds they may struggle a bit. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And then Doggies at Marvel, that Doggies should win that convincingly. And then Hawthorn
Yeah.
in Launceston, Hawthorn, purely based on form alone, should win that convincingly.
Yeah, we've already gone a bit on the other way, but yeah, as I said, unfortunately, the home ground advantage doesn't amount to much when the team also plays there a lot.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate kind of draw, but you know, you do what you can. If they're gonna stay 17th and keep Richmond at 18th, it's good for them. Obviously bad for Richmond. But like,
Yeah.
it's progress.
Yeah,
It's small progress,
I'd say
but it's
they're like
progress.
75% chance of finishing second last, and then that 25% chance of finishing last.
Yeah. Um, and then you've got the final game, which was surprisingly very
Oh yeah,
interesting up north.
just a little sleeper. Yeah, no, it was an absolutely treat to watch. We're of course talking about the Brisbane Lions at the Gabba, winning against the Sydney Swans. It was a finals intensity match for a probable finals matchup with storylines to boot. Brisbane put on the pain early as Sydney once again struggled to get going. Brisbane were ruthlessly efficient in the first quarter and were comfortably winning possession, with the big Mosef Joe Danaher kicking 3 goals against Carlton, and things were looking quite ominous. Sydney only managed the one goal for the quarter, and then for the next 2 quarters, Sydney would come back fast, restoring the margin at halftime and keeping the Lions to 2 goals. And if I told you that at the end of that second goal, it would take 25 minutes for them to kick the next, you'll think Sydney would win. But that's not what happened. Going back a bit, unfortunately for Sydney, they only managed 2-6 in the third quarter, which kept the Lions in it, despite them not scoring any. And the Swans would have to deal with 2 second quarter injuries, with Papley and Rampley going down. Blakey and Hayward also picking up minor injuries. They would play through it and play through it very bravely. And the last quarter, which is really what I want to emphasize, because it was one for the ages. It started with Hugh McCluggage going ham, getting a nice boundary side snap in general play, followed by an absolute roost from what I called 60 odd meters out.
I remember seeing. I saw the highlight for this. It was insane.
Yeah, so he got 2 goals in the space of a minute. And then a series of behinds would get them the lead back. A hobbled Hayward would get them back the lead. Or Sydney back the lead, as I mentioned. He was knocked around early, and despite being quiet due to last week's knock, Charlie Cameron provided a massive marker goal to restore the lead back to Brisbane. Then it went back to Sydney as Lloyd kicked a mammoth goal, and it looked like Sydney might hang on despite their injuries. But Calamachi roosted a goal from a contested possession from 40 meters out. Absolutely erupted the G. I think it's the biggest response to an Always song being played that I've ever seen. Obviously his goal shot after the siren. The music that they play after the goal. He missed a set shot to seal it as well after the fact. But Brisbane would prevent Sydney's last attack, winning it 11-13, 79 to 11-11, 77. So as you can imagine, a game like this with ties and momentum, the game and performers often weren't consistent, but there were a few players that had really big games. I think the most influential, especially in the first and a bit in the last, was Cam Rayner, who played around the ground stoppages and was great up forward with 20 possessions, 7 inside 50s, 4 intercepts, 6 clearances, 7 tackles, 2 of those being inside 50, 6 goal involvements, and 2 goals won. This was a bit of everything game for himself. And despite the forgettable first quarter, Tom McCartan, who I mentioned earlier, would team up with the Pelican to rebuff Brisbane, especially in that especially in that middle quarter, middle part of the game. With McCartan leading the intercepts with 12 intercepts, 6 intercept marks, and the Pelican kept Hipwood to a point, 10 possessions, and minimal impact. It was a huge defensive turnaround after that first quarter because they got absolutely blown out. Talking about There's one who I forgot to mention about All Australian, who I've written here. The Big O, Oscar McInerney,
True.
would plead his case as a would-be candidate, as I think he actually went to town. He set up the clearance Thomas's early. He had 22 possessions, 7 clearances, 7 inside 50s, for 6 score involvements. He definitely got the best of Grundy all around. Grundy didn't have that much impact around the ground and only had a couple of hit outs more for less clearances. And despite Ed not looking to end his day early, Harris Andrews would finish up the game on field after a solid 9 intercepts with 5 intercept marks, keeping McDonald quiet. And Joyce and Lester, again, they were the 2 players that lifted, prevented Sydney from getting easy looks when they were dominant. So yeah, as much as Sydney was shutting down the Lions in that middle period, the Lions did as much as they could to prevent that margin from blowing out, kept them in the game. Still talking about restriction, Taylor Adams playing the role of shutdown on Lachie Neale, keeping him to 18 possessions, 8 of which happened in the last quarter when everyone was getting a bit gassed due to obviously Sydney having less rotations. And the other way, he got 8 score involvements and a goal, which was fantastic for him. And as I said, there was a lot of performance. The last one, Robbie Fox was everywhere. 26 disposal at 80% efficiency with 10 marks, 6 intercepts. And I actually lied. Matt Roberts is in there as well. 23 disposals, 87% efficiency, 5 intercepts, 8 marks, and 5 score involvements. We've mentioned before, I absolutely love Matt Roberts, despite him not getting consistent games with Sydney. But yeah, he's a massive player that they're going to want to pump into. And it was a massive game. A bit disappointing for Sydney in the fact that they lost. But again, this is Brisbane at the Gabba playing really great football. So they just need to find a win to guarantee top spot. Hopefully they get it early because these injury setbacks might put them back a bit, but it's otherwise an unscathed year for them, so they'll be able to work it out. And yeah, as I said, honestly, both coaches would probably like the fact that they're able to stop each other team at their best. But for Brisbane, they probably still want to work on trying to limit the runs that can come against them. Especially in the finals where tides can turn pretty heavily. But apart from that, as I said, they're one of the most informed teams of the comp and arguably probably have the most potent forward line behind Carlton. I'll say that most definitely now. Sydney,
I would say
overall has a good offense, but in terms of pure forward line, Sydney tend to get a bit more out the middle.
Yeah, that's true. Sydney do get a lot more out of their midfielders rather than their pure forwards. And we've seen that very often as well. Like you look at even some of Sydney's wins, it hasn't always been their forwards that have done the most damaging work. It's always been their midfielders, especially in like Golden, Heaney, Adams when he came back from injury. Like they've all been like very, very important into that structure.
Yeah, and then they just rely on like Heaney, sorry, not Heaney,
McLean, Warner as well. Sorry.
So yeah, but and then they just rely on McLean, McDonald, and Amati getting at least 2 or 3 goals between them to just keep it ticking over.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, as I said, Brisbane, with their forward line, obviously with the talent down there, but some of the people that they've added, Kyle Lohman, Bruce Reville, is probably another one that I'm forgetting to mention. But yeah, as I said, all that combined, with the standard Jay Danaher,
Eric Hipwood.
I would say Hipwood, but Hipwood's really not been that much of a factor lately. And yeah, Cam Rayners has some good games. And yeah, it's all very dangerous. Oh, and Calamachi, of course.
Yes.
That's who I'm forgetting.
Yeah,
he's lifted
I like to call him
a lot the last few months.
I think he's very underrated at the moment. Like, he's always been a very decent performer. He's definitely had quiet games.
Yeah.
Especially early this season. There were definitely a couple of spots in his career as a whole where he's been very, very quiet, but had a couple of standout moments.
Yeah.
But this season, I think, has been his most consistent.
Yeah, I think this task up forward sort of solidified his game plan because, yeah, as you mentioned, he's sort of been a bit of a wingy sort of player. Might get a bit lost at times, but yeah, he's been, as I said, I don't want to say like he was lacking focus before, but he's definitely been playing with a certain amount of focus to him since he's been playing as a more of a forward player. So, yeah, absolutely great to see.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah, we'll go for the run home.
Yep. We'll try and get through this quickly because I'm actually running out of time. So Brisbane, Gold Coast Suns at People First Stadium, St Kilda at Marvel, GWS at the Gabba. I will be there. It's going to be fun to watch. Collingwood at the MCG and Essendon at the Gabba. I think they can win at least 3 of these.
Yeah.
St Kilda could be a danger game just purely because it's at Marvel and they've really kind of found a sort of good structure at Marvel.
Yeah, exactly.
GWS at the Gabba could be a 50-50 game with GWS back in some good form. Again, Gold Coast, Q Clash. Are Brisbane gonna shut down their fortress run on the Gold Coast? Who knows? But Collingwood and Essendon, I think, are going to be the 2 games that they could probably win most convincingly, especially because Brisbane want that extra experience on the MCG.
Yeah.
But again,
yeah, you're right. It's
like Brisbane also haven't played the best. Like they played fairly well outside of home this season, but it hasn't been the greatest.
It's not been as bad. Yeah. But yeah, I still think it's going to be a top 4 lock for Brisbane. I'll put them with Carlton. I'd expect Sydney, Carlton, and Brisbane to make up the top 4, and then one team a bit flexible. One position a bit flexible.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. Like, I think realistically, and we've already talked about this, but I think Freo will probably end up getting that 4th spot. But again, it's no solidified guarantee at the moment. It just makes the most sense for them for it to be Freo because their run home is fairly convincing.
Doesn't have that happen because they win at the last game. But yeah, I said I wouldn't put the odds on. Port winning that game.
And then for Sydney's run home, we've got the Doggies at the SCG, Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, Collingwood at the SCG, Essendon at Marvel, and the Adelaide Crows at the SCG. All very winnable games for Sydney, no doubt.
Yeah.
Especially the ones at home. I think Port at Adelaide Oval, will be a danger game. Actually, all of these are in fact danger games. I'll be honest, but. I think Port and Essendon, purely because they're away from the SCG, are going to be the most dangerous.
Yeah. And I'll back them against the Bulldogs, Collingwood, and Adelaide.
I'll back them especially against Collingwood and Adelaide, but I think the Doggies, if the Doggies are going to stay in good form, could surprise them.
The only way I could see them dropping 3 games is if they rest one of the later games because they've already secured top spot. Depending on their players.
Yeah, so. Like they're pretty much nearly solidified top 4. They probably need to win at least 1, maybe 2 more.
But with the injury list, I can't really see them resting players because they haven't really had that much.
They don't have the
need to play players out
massive amount of flexibility right now.
Yeah.
Overall, not a bad analysis. I think Sydney definitely could be surprised by a couple of teams, but for the most part, they should be good to stay at least top 4, regardless.
Yeah, I don't see them dropping below 6 losses or above 6 losses.
No, I think they're pretty good as they are. All right, let's take a quick look at the ladder. Not much has really all that changed. Most teams that you expect to be in the top 8 are still in the top 8. So Sydney, Carlton, top 2. Brisbane's jumped to 3rd. Freo's jumped to 4th. GWS have jumped to 5th. Geelong dropped down to 6th. Port Adelaide has jumped to 7th, and the Essendon have dropped down to 8th position. 9th to 13th is pretty interesting at the moment. The Doggies have jumped up to 9th, with Melbourne dropping to 10th. Hawthorn has jumped to 11th, and the Gold Coast Suns has dropped to 12th, and Collingwood have dropped to 13th. It's all still a very, very close race for the top 8 spots, with, again, GWS, Geelong, and Port Adelaide all on 44 points, and the Doggies, Melbourne, and Hawthorn all on 40 points. And then to round out the bottom 5, it's Adelaide, St Kilda, West Coast, North Melbourne, and Richmond, which hasn't changed at the moment.
Yeah.
And then let's go and take... for MRO, no one's taken a week off. It was all fines. No one's missing a week, which I'm very surprised about, I'll be honest.
Yeah. No, it's right. Never got the Rising Star, or?
I've been refreshing it and it hasn't come up yet, so it may have to wait till next week.
Yeah, I'll just give it to Oh, there was a player that I thought, you know what, I've forgotten it anyway. It doesn't matter.
Who
Everyone
knows?
can win the Rising Star.
Richmond never wins the Rising Star. Definitely haven't this season. We still haven't gotten a nomination. Anyway, doesn't matter. Friday night, Carlton and Port Adelaide at Marvel Stadium. As we've already talked about, this could be a danger game for Carlton.
But
we'll also
do a quick rundown of it.
Carlton are in better form. You'd expect Carlton to win this kind of cleanly, but I think Port could surprise them.
Yeah, I think that, obviously the biggest thing is how the Tolls match up against each other. Port did an okay job at quelling it, but again, they leaked through too many off turnovers. It's hard to see them winning this away from home. But yeah, as I said, what is interesting to see is how Port's defense hold up, just like last time, as well as the midfield battle, where they were both actually pretty decent.
I think Carlton's midfield and Port's midfield match up really well. It's very exciting to watch.
Yeah, it makes for an entertaining battle. And yeah, I think Port will still always be able to generate a few. Carlton's defense isn't world-beating, still pretty solid. But yeah, Port have a decent mix of tall forwards and seem to be doing a bit better the last couple of weeks in terms of forward movement. So we'll see. But yeah, no, I said I'll
definitely swing Carlton.
I'll tip Port, but
you're really going to tip Port?
I always tip Port.
Let's quote that. Always
tip. Well, unless they're like bottom four trash. But
yeah,
apart from that, I'll always tip Port.
All right, then North Melbourne and Geelong in Hobart. Again, I think North could genuinely surprise them. However, Geelong definitely need a hard bounce back, and this probably end up being it.
Yeah, it depends on the conditions, because, as I said, Geelong will be able to get a bit of...
Being that it's in Hobart, it's going to be cold. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I know that. But yeah, as I said, I think it's more just... I think Geelong won't be shut out in terms of possession like the Bulldogs did to them. So despite how bad they look, as I said, they should be able to get more of their natural game plan. But if it is windy, it might hurt, some of the... second looks at Geelong trying it in the forward line might help North Melbourne's defence out a bit. And as we all know, North are used to being able to score in these conditions. So you can see reason for the upset, but I was still back Geelong.
All right, and then Q Clash, the second Q Clash of the season, the Gold Coast Suns and the Brisbane Lions on the Gold Coast. Again, Gold Coast currently have that fortress kind of mindset at People First Stadium. But Brisbane are just the team in better form overall. Will they play spoiler to that? I think they will. And I think it's a pretty even consensus. Could Geelong surprise them? Oh, not Geelong. Could the Gold Coast Suns surprise them? Yes.
Their team in the mix after their game. Very quick flight.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not like it's 4 hours from Tassie to Queensland.
Probably 5, yeah.
But yeah, could the Suns surprise Brisbane? Very much so. But I think Brisbane are just in better form and have the better kind of overall game plan to play against the Suns. Yeah,
exactly. I wouldn't imagine. I really didn't like Gold Coast last week, and I think even against Port, they were a bit hollow in some of their possessions.
All right, and then St Kilda and Essendon at Marvel Stadium. Again, this game could honestly go either way. Although Essendon are in great form, it was just a bit unlucky that they lost that game against Adelaide. St Kilda coming off a bit of decent form and a solid win. However, I think that Essendon might just have the better kind of structure to play against what St Kilda offer, and we'll probably just run over them, to be honest.
And then they'll run over them, but yeah, I think they'll win. I think this is going to be like a 70 to 50 scoreline. Honestly, St Kilda will mitigate Essendon, but Essendon has shown if you give them enough possession, they'll for the most part make the most of it. So yeah, I'll back them in to do the same here.
All right, and then Melbourne and GWS at the MCG. Again, I think the Giants, they will really love the experience of playing on the MCG. They definitely did against us, and they look great against us. Granted, it's Richmond at the moment. But Melbourne are in a kind of, I wouldn't say they're a similar position to Richmond, but their defensive structure is kind of weakened over the past couple of
Yeah, I
weeks,
was
and
gonna
I
say
think the
they'll be
Giants are
defending
gonna.
worse than Richmond.
I think the Giants are gonna definitely surprise them and probably get a really strong jump against them as well.
I'm sure it would be that surprising. Like I said, Giants have a very painful forward line, so
I think their midfield
yeah, if
line
they
at the
defend,
moment is also just better overall.
it would need to take a huge swing in defense for Melbourne to be in this. But yeah,
And then we have the Western Derby yet again. With this time, it's Fremantle hosting, and I think, as we've discussed before, it's a pretty clear consensus that they should win this convincingly.
yeah, and look, you can almost copy and paste what I said last time. You know, I would imagine Frio's inside midfield would get the job done. Yeah, it's gonna be, it might be good to see some of the evolution of the first matchup because they did get beaten pretty comprehensively
Mhm.
at parts, and yeah. So as I said, I think they've gotten better since then, and West Coast is obviously um I wouldn't say they've necessarily gotten worse, but they're definitely, you know, there's a reason why they can, get solid wins and then lose the next game by 100 points. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's,
absolutely right.
yeah, or near 100, I should say.
All right, and then the Sunday games, Collingwood and Richmond at the MCG. I think Collingwood should kind of run away with this purely based on the fact that we don't have a ruck, and I think Collingwood's midfield will probably shut us down pretty well. Although, if you look
Yeah,
at the teams we faced over the past couple of weeks, our midfield hasn't really been shut down. It's more just been the forward line and the back line have just run out of gas to be able to keep defending or keep trying to convert from what our midfield offers.
yeah. And look, if Collingwood are going to play so loose, that's going to benefit Richmond, no doubt. And that would actually be their avenue to win. Like, if you just purely off last week's form, I would put Richmond to win this, but it doesn't quite work like that.
No, sadly not.
Yeah, so I said I'll just stick Collingwood just, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost this.
I think Richmond could genuinely surprise them just based on Collingwood's form at the moment. However,
Yeah,
I think it might end up actually coming down to their ruck battle. Just Darcy Cameron, I think, is just gonna walk all over our midfield.
yeah,
But we shall see. I'm hoping I can actually get to that match, but we'll find out. All right, then Sydney and the Western Bulldogs at the SCG. Sydney should win this, as we already discussed.
yeah,
But the doggies are in great form at the moment. They've really
yeah. I
developed
think that's the thing.
their new structure,
Yeah,
especially with like Rory Lobb being in the back line. And I think that's going to actually be really key to shutting down Sydney's forward momentum.
like I said, I think it's one of those things where form makes it seem closer, but I think on matchup, Sydney's general shutdown capabilities, the Dogs don't like getting clamped down.
No, dogs love
And
to
if they
play
can
loose.
mitigate. Yeah, exactly. And if you can mitigate the stuff in the clearances, Sydney should win. But again, like it's pretty dangerous if you let the bulldog off the chain, so to speak. So tip Sydney, but yeah, as I said any Bulldogs games is like a wide variance of what could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And then final game of the round, possibly game of the round, is the Adelaide Crows and
Yeah,
Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval. Both teams in very interesting positions. I think Adelaide's injuries might just catch up with them and hinder them a little bit, with no Dawson, no Butts, still no Rankin either. Um,
mm,
if Tex comes in and him and Silthorpe both play forward, I think that'll be really great for them. However, I think Hawthorn's defensive work and their midfield work is kind of almost second to none at the moment.
yeah, and I think also their transition from the midfield to forward line. We've been saying Adelaide's defense has been pretty solid. I don't think it's quite mature. Well, not mature as in
Age, but in terms of just
yeah,
how it
no,
kind of
that's what I
gels.
meant. Like they're not playing loose or anything. They're just young. But yeah, as I said, Hawthorn can create a lot of different looks going forward, which can be very hard to defend. And yeah, as I said, I think Adelaide, this is all about making it respectable because I think they can finish off the year fairly well, even if that's only 2 wins. Yeah, it's just what their fixtures stilled up for them. But yeah, expect Hawthorn to take away. I really want to see Adelaide take the fight up to them because I think this, as you said, could be a really good contest.
Yeah, absolutely. For this one, I think I might actually swing the Hawks. Although I think this is a game that they probably will lose in terms of their run home, just because it is at Adelaide Oval. But it will also very much depend on what Adelaide's in and outs look like because of some of the injuries that they have. So swinging Hawks at the moment, but it's a very tight 50-50. All right, and that pretty much does it for us. I'm in a bit of a rush because I have a session to get to in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to do quick finish up here. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out with us this week. We're looking very much forward to the round ahead and all of the exciting games to talk about, especially the Derby and especially these 50-50 games. I really want to see Richmond play close to Collingwood, but we can only hope and pray in terms of my case. We will let you know next week or even on the socials post this week who the rising star is because we didn't have enough time to get to it this week. Again, go check out those socials. I have unlocked everything, at least in terms of the podcast socials after my predicament last week, so we're all good there. My socials themselves are still a little bit locked down, but that's okay. If you want to chat to us, feel free to reach out. We're always easy to contact otherwise. And yeah, thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week for episode 23. Catch you then.